suggesting they need a fundamental reset, saying Labour is lacking a project and was playing with the future of the country. He wrote this in a 5,700-word essay, which was published this morning. He said Labour had held back business and growth since it won the election. He talked about the increase of employers' national insurance, the Workers' Right Bill, and the rise in minimum wage too. And he was critical of the government's spend on welfare, called for the triple lock on pensions to be reformed. And he was pretty scathing about this sort of shadow leadership contest that's going on, saying, talking about Wes Streeting, the former health secretary, Andy Burnham, who's running in that by-election, talking about them as sort of huge talents, but then saying the debate has an extraordinarily retro 20th century feel to it. And as you say, he spoke for a long time to our colleague John Sopel, the co-host of The Newsagents. And one of the criticisms they talked about that Sir Tony has of the Labour Party at the moment is that it's so bogged down, he would say, in personalities at the top rather than having a clear strategy.
And so what I'm saying to the Labour Party is, first of all, you've got to work out what the direction of the country is that you want. And then you could debate who should be leader. But there's no point in making a leadership change until you're satisfied with the policy direction. And in many ways, what's happening at the moment is the absence of a real policy debate. And so far, the contributions of, and I praise Andy Burnham and Wes Streeting. Indeed, I praise Keir. Look, these are people, I understand that they're good people. They're trying to do their best. But there's no point in deciding on the basis of personality who leads the country unless you understand what's our project for governing, what's our purpose in governing. And that, to me, is just not clear at the moment.
But here we are in 2026. It's, quite a while since you were Prime Minister. We now have the attention economy. We now have the internet. Where personality and being able to tell a story and create a narrative does matter. And look, if you go back to 1994, when you became the leader of the Labour Party, part of the reason it was you rather than Gordon Brown was because you could tell a story. You were a good communicator, and those things do matter.
Yeah, look, of course, you're absolutely right. They do matter, but they don't matter as much as the right policy. I mean, I could have been the best communicator in the world, but if we hadn't been New Labour, we would never have won 3 successive full terms of government. In the Labour Party's 120-year history, it has never won 2 successive full terms of government, except under New Labour. And that was because there was a project with a philosophy behind it, which is essentially to fuse what I call the Labour and Liberal traditions of progressive politics. So yes, of course it matters. You're absolutely right. It matters the personality, your ability to communicate and so on. But if the project isn't a good one, well thought through, it doesn't matter how good a communicator you are, you're not going to succeed.
I think it's interesting, Iain, that he wanted to make the point in that clip and too in his essay that the government's principal problem, as he puts it, isn't Keir's personality or a failure to communicate our achievements or a need to assert more strongly Labour's values. But as you say, talks about it basically a lack of policy, a lack of clear vision. And I think that's interesting because there's been a huge amount of critique and narrative from Labour folk about what has gone wrong in the last 2 years, almost 2 years. And they often talk about the lack of a narrative, the lack of a story, the lack of being able to communicate, as they see it, the good things that they have done, exactly what Tony Blair is now disagreeing with.
But I interpreted that as throwing down the gauntlet to anybody who wants to succeed Keir Starmer, or indeed Keir Starmer himself, because what they've got to do now, he's saying it's not just about a change in personality, it's got to be about policy. And I don't know whether this is in a clip that we're going to hear a bit later. But there was one sentence that where he said, look, the way forward over the next few years is for the Labour Party to come up with ideas, not necessarily following public opinion, but to lead public opinion and say to the people, right, this is how we think the country should be governed and what should happen. And then the salesperson aspect of it comes in. You've got to sell it to the electorate. And I don't think that Andy Burnham or Wes Streeting or Angela Rayner or Keir Starmer have got the remotest idea about the policy part. and he's saying that has to come first.
Well, I think that is in the next clip we are going to hear, Ian, but I think that's bang on. I think obviously there is a leadership race coming. I mean, it's sort of ongoing already, isn't it? But what I think Sir Tony has tried to do today and has succeeded in doing is sparking or beginning to spark a policy debate that all the candidates will have to engage in. And that hasn't really happened before. And indeed, when I speak to some Labour MPs, they say that hasn't happened for an awfully long time in the Labour Party. But as I say, hearing another clip from John Sopel and Tony Blair, their interview earlier, John also asked Sir Tony about welfare reform and what to do about those Labour backbenchers getting in the way of the government's plans.
You see, on welfare reform, I mean, I know, a lot of the Labour Party people will be not in favour of what I'm about to say, but the Conservative Party made an offer at an earlier stage that they would cooperate with Labour on welfare reform. We should just have accepted that offer. Said, fine, let's sit down and work it out together. And then Keir Starmer could say to those MPs, and by the way, there are a lot who do believe you need welfare reform. Don't think they're all of one mind on that. Yes, there are people who are going to rebel. I had people who are rebelling all the time. But it would give him some protection against those people. And I think the country would, frankly, welcome the possibility of people sitting down together and saying, as you have to say, if you look at incapacity disability benefits and the rise, the explosion in benefit spending, and a lot of that now driven by almost half or maybe more than half by mental health issues. You're going to end up in a situation potentially where at the end of this decade, you've got 5 million people of working age on incapacity and disability benefit. You can't afford that as a country. And then you've got a triple lock on pensions in circumstances where you're going to have a demographic challenge in the future. And, that's adding more billions and billions of pounds of spending that someone's got to pay for. So it's not like you're not engaged in this welfare reform debate because you're a cruel person. You just got to look at the facts and think, aren't people who are at work at the moment paying enough tax? So the answer is they are, but they're going to have to pay even more if you're going to continue with those levels of spending.
Your argument throughout this essay is that we've got to put policy first and politics second. But what you're describing a lot of the time is, when you're talking about how you need to win over the backbenchers and how you need to make an argument, is that actually Keir Starmer is really lousy at politics.
Well, it's not. It's not just about the explanation, though. I mean, I could give you a good explanation or a bad explanation, but it's the policy does matter, no? I mean, I agree with you that, of course, it's how you're able to lead people, how you're able to challenge them. Because as I always say to people in politics, the easy thing is to say yes, the hard thing is to say no. And, one of the things I've also tried and say, and I say this to any political leaders I've worked with, is that one approach to politics is you try and find out what the people want and give it to them. And that's how a lot of British politics has been these last years. But actually, that's not leadership. Leadership is working out what the people need and persuading them it's what they want. It's a different thing. And we would be in a much better position if you did the latter, if you worked out what you thought the right answer was and then shaped the politics around it.
There are a couple of things to pull out from that, Ian. And I think one of them is, I think he is completely right, based on the conversations that I have, that there are lots of Labour MPs who do want welfare reform, who feel a bit scarred from what happened last year, but are aware that it desperately needs to happen. But they don't know what form that would take yet. And they know that that is the difficult bit. And the other thing from Tony Blair there on welfare again is that, he is talking about the fact that they need to lead. And, I think we may see more of that in the future. But there is a lot that Labour folk that I've spoken to today properly disagree with from this essay. And he also, Tony Blair, talked a little bit about Brexit and Europe, which, as you know, has already come up in that shadow leadership contest that I mentioned with Wes Streeting, saying that he wanted to be back in Europe, and Andy Burnham saying previously that he wanted to be back in Europe one day, but then in this by-election that he is fighting, where there are a list of candidates on our website, he talked about the fact that he didn't think now was the right time for that. So Tony Blair said today he cautioned against a push to rejoin the European Union, instead saying that we should work on areas of shared interest, including defence and energy.
If we go back into a structured relationship with Europe, and I think we should, we can only do that properly from a position of strength, economic strength and actually military strength. And at the moment, we don't have either in the way we need to. So, and the reason for that is it's going to be a negotiation. And we need to be sure that Europe is also negotiating with us in a way that suits us. So, for example, on this technology question, at the moment, Europe is moving, frankly, not in the right direction on technology regulation. It's all weighted towards looking at the dangers and not the opportunities. Now, I believe there's every chance Europe will change that. The European Council's different today. The European Commission's in favor of the Draghi report, which is the Bible of European reform and change that's been adopted by the European Council. The European Parliament is much more open to shifting on this policy. But it's a negotiation. We can't say this technology revolution is the biggest thing and then join forces with people who think it's a bad thing. So, this is why you, just as the answer to Britain's problems in 2016 was not Brexit, the answer to Britain's problems in 2026 in a much worse situation is not simply reversing it. So it's not that I believe you've got to engage with Europe and enter into a negotiation with them, but it's going to be a negotiation. And we won't do well out of that negotiation unless we first sorted our problems here at home.
Now, we've had a response from the government this morning. The Treasury Minister Dan Tomlinson said that he thought Tony Blair was wrong over the UK facing relegation from Premier League of Nations. He points to the UK having the fastest growth than other G7 nations in the first quarter of 2026. But he does agree with Tony Blair. There should not be a contest of personalities in the Labour Party. And Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester Mayor, he had said that he was going to give a considered response tomorrow, but he couldn't wait, and he has spoken to The Observer. He has talked about the fact that this essay doesn't mention inequality once, and if he doesn't get how that's driving politics now, if you're not rooting, he says, your analysis and the fact that people are unable to live and that things were taken for granted are no longer affordable, then you are not understanding what's going on. And in the last few minutes too, we have had an op-ed published in The Guardian from Wes Streeting, the former Health Secretary.
That election-losing newspaper, as Tony Blair called it.
As Tony Blair called it, yes. What a line. He called it that on the radio this morning. And Wes Streeting has also talked about inequality, saying the missing word in this essay was inequality. Answer isn't longing for the 70s or 90s. The answers have to be new, but must also be Labour. And just to leave you with one thought, Iain, there's been some exclusive polling done by Labour List that Tony Blair is the most popular Labour leader of the last 40 years among party members.
Right, Aggie, thank you very much indeed. Well, I want to know, do you agree with me that the Labour Party, and wait for this, should be bringing back Tony Blair into the fold? Because the cynic in me thinks that Tony Blair has done this because he was so angry at seeing Gordon Brown on the steps of Number 10 being brought into the fold by Keir Starmer. And he's thinking, well, why hasn't Keir Starmer asked me? Because there was another question that he was asked in, I can't remember, was that interview with John Soper or another one I was listening to earlier, where he was asked, how often does Keir Starmer ring you for advice? And Tony Blair went silent for a couple of seconds and said, well, I mean, I have talked to him a little. And it was slightly uncomfortable. So I think he would like to be brought back into the fold. I'm not suggesting that he should fight a by-election and become a leadership candidate, but there's a thought for you, isn't it? 0345 6060 973. And I feel I can say this as somebody on the right of British politics. I mean, some of you will think it's really odd that I've said some positive things about Tony Blair, but of all the prime ministers since Margaret Thatcher fell, he is the most significant prime minister in my view. And I may not agree with him on everything, but I do want to listen to what he has to say. Why do so many of you not want to listen to what he has to say? It's 7:20.
This is LBC.
The following is from TfL.
I got loads of flowers the other day and messages from people I didn't even know. My mates spelled out my name in tea lights. And my mom hung my favourite footy shirt on the railings, next to the lamppost, where I got killed. By a nice lady, just someone who thought it was okay to go a few miles an hour over the limit.
Speeding injures or kills over 1,000 people in London every year. Slow down. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Feel every pass and every goal. Discover the next generation of televisions at John Lewis. Experience the full clarity of the latest RGB and OLED technology. Brought to you by some of the world's best brands. Price matched against 25 leading retailers with a 5-year guarantee on all TVs. Your best view of every game is available right now at John Lewis. It's football upgraded. T's and C's and exclusions apply. See johnlewis.com for details.
From the producers of Yellowstone,
welcome to Texas, honey.
Beth and Rip are back.
A legacy is a beautiful thing.
A new original series.
But only if it survives.
Family is the only thing worth fighting for.
This life here is gonna work, isn't it?
We'll make it work.
I can make this a lot harder for all y'all.
Then peace will have to wait.
Dutton Ranch. Stream now only on Paramount Plus. T's and C's apply. Subscription required. 18+.
This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 22 minutes past 7. What do you make of Tony Blair's utterances today, or his article? I don't know how many of you have actually read the whole thing, probably not many. But he does say some interesting things in it. Would you like to see him return to the front line of British politics? It has happened before. Of course, David Cameron became Foreign Secretary under Rishi Sunak. I'm not suggesting that either Keir Starmer or Andy Burnham or Wes Streeting or Angela Rayner would make him Foreign Secretary in their governments. But it's a thought, isn't it? Let's go to David in Uxbridge. Hello, David.
Oh, hi, Ian, and thanks for taking my call. So I'm, deeply mistrustful of Tony Blair, and not just because of Iraq, but because of his associations after Iraq and how he's enriched himself with associations with a lot of Middle Eastern dictators, Central Asian dictators, and now his associations with American big tech and Oracle. And I think that's the agenda that is pushing here. If you look at, nothing wrong with technology, but Britain is, in some ways, it's a technological vassal state to American big tech. And I think Tony Blair wants to entrench that, and I think we should resist it.
Well, I think what he's trying to say is that Britain needs to be in the forefront of this. And he did say in the article and in one of the interviews that the European Union is regulating AI so much that Europe will not really have a say in anything. And he's urging Keir Starmer and others to resist that temptation. Now, you can say, well, he's only saying that because he's paid to say it by big tech companies because they contribute to his Tony Blair Institute. Well, I mean, fine. It doesn't really get the argument very far, does it?
Yeah, but we're in a multipolar world now, Ian, and there's nothing wrong with technology, but if Britain is totally dependent on America, there's another superpower away that's a technological giant. Europe, like when Tony Blair was
but it isn't.
Minister,
that's the point. Europe is not a technological giant.
And it needs to be developing its own. And if you look at the record of Tony government, it didn't have an industrial strategy apart from pump up the City of London and sell off a lot of our technologies to American private equity. And that was the money, and he used some of the receipts from that for some welfare. So, I don't think he's got really any kind of industrial strategy. And as I say, I just think he's lobbying for entrenching Britain's dependence on American tech. And I think we should, I'm not saying the British state can't function without it. That's the reality. But we need to be weaning ourselves off that and diversifying our tech, developing our own. Because America is an unstable regime at the moment.
We have, after America and China, we have the biggest tech sector and AI sector in the world. So we're not exactly lagging behind on that. I mean, we're never going to be as big as America or China, clearly. I mean, we're not as big a country. But I don't think we do too badly on that. And sometimes we need to shout about that a bit more.
It's all our infrastructure is on America. Like I work in the NHS. We're totally dependent on Microsoft. All the, a tech giant in California can pull the plug and our NHS wouldn't function. Our education system wouldn't function. I'm not saying that there's not these skills, these technologies in Britain, but I really think Britain should look at this dependence, and it needs a proper industrial strategy, and it needs to agree with Burnham a bit, that you need to look at the gross, because the political instability in Britain comes from gross wealth and income inequality, pumping up the city of London.
It really doesn't.
I think that's the root of it, Ian. What do you think?
Well, I mean, for Andy Burnham and both Andy Burnham and Wes Streeting to say the same thing in response to this essay, that Tony Blair didn't mention the word inequality. I mean, what an intellectual response that is. It's ridiculous.
Well, what do you think the reasons for the political instability? We're going to have 6 prime ministers in the same amount of years. That's not because because Britain has a huge productivity problem. It has a huge wealth inequality problem, and it's a decline in power, and that was
the whole point of Tony Blair's remarks, where he said he doesn't want us to be relegated from the Premier League of Nations, and I think it's a bit of a wake-up call, and I think a lot of politicians, not just in the Labour Party but across the political sphere, need to take note of that. David, thank you very much. Let's go to Adam in St Albans. Hi, Adam.
Good evening, Ian. Great speech, a great show as always. So we get messages out the way. Not a Labour vote. I think Tony Blair's 6,000 words are a rallying call for the poll. I've read the words. The man is a great politician, I believe. Now we've known that he's now been passed for 20 years. And he really wants the best for the UK. And we can really see set out in his words there, this is the way forward. Look.
Andrew, your line's giving up, I'm afraid. We're not getting every word, so we'll come back to you if I may. But I kind of agree with what you're saying there. Let's go to Kieran in Bracknell. Hello, Kieran.
Hello, Ian. Good to speak to you again.
Hi.
I totally agree with you. I am, like you, I am not in the same camp as Tony Blair, but what an absolute leadership sense what he made in the whole interview. This is lacking in our politicians, and the fact that Wes Streeting and Andy both come out with the same logic and in their newspapers, respective newspaper, just shows how incompetent they both are. They're not getting it. You're talking about the most successful leader in there. And of course, I agree with a few of the concerns regarding being a vassal state. We are not vassal state. We are top 3-4 in the technological side, and we should be shouting at the top of our voice. And that is what he is talking about. And he is not opening the Brexit wounds. He is talking about negotiating from the place of strength.
Yeah.
What doesn't make sense? I don't get it. I don't.
I completely agree with you. I think a lot of people are. Well, I suspect that a lot of the commentators on this article haven't actually read it. They're just taking out snippets which suit their own political narrative. But I mean, what he said about net zero, which we're going to talk about that after 9 o'clock. So I hope you'll keep listening to that, Kieran, because I thought he talked absolute sense on net zero and exposed this government's sham of a policy on it.
If I may interject here, Ian. I mean, I think, you know what? If there is somewhere a by-election somewhere, right, and if he is going to stand, if people do not put the Iraq war behind, of course, I don't agree with what he has done with Iraq, okay? Let's put it on record. But I think he's going to take all of the candidates, to floor. The guy talks sense even in 2026. I think we need to put his mistakes behind. And as you mentioned about the poll, I think he is. I have no doubts if he wants to make a re-comeback, okay? If he really wants.
Well, I'm not sure, actually. I mean, I'd like to think that, because, I mean, anything could happen in by-elections, but Tony Blair standing in a by-election, it is fantasy politics. But we have one vote for Tony Blair coming back to the House of Commons. Will there be more over the next half an hour? Keep listening and find out. It's 7:30 on LBC. Let's get the latest news headlines with Amelia Cox.
Wes Streeting and Andy Burnham have accused Sir Tony Blair of ignoring inequality in his attack on the Labour government. The former Prime Minister warned of prioritising politics over policy amid calls for a change in leadership. Police say a 30-year-old mother of one who was shot and killed in Sheffield on Monday was an innocent bystander. She's been identified as Shanice Brooks. And Donald Trump has told his cabinet there's still work to do before a peace deal with Iran can be reached. Earlier, Iranian state media claimed there's a draft agreement in place that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz, but Washington's denied that. LBC weather, thundery showers pushing east across England and Wales this evening and tonight. Mostly dry with some cloud everywhere else. Lows of 7 degrees.
LBC.
Go all Irish to France with great low prices. With Irish Ferries, you can for less. Irish Ferries, see travel differently. T's and C's apply.
Is your cat drinking enough? Discover Purina One Hydrolife and help support their daily hydration with a taste they'll enjoy. Purina One Hydrolife. Make it easy.
Next. Hi, just these, thanks. Do you do cashback? Just need to check you're not a robot first. New security policy. Okay. How many traffic lights can you see out the window? 2. No, that's wrong. Right, well, obviously I'm not a robot. That's what a robot would say.
What a load of malarkey. Smarty keeps things simple, like 80 gigabytes for £10. And on a rolling monthly SIM plan, you're free to leave any time. Less malarkey, more smarty. Search Smarty Mobile.
This September, the world's top tennis players return to London for the 9th edition of the Labour Cup. From the 25th to the 27th, Team Europe face off against Team World at one of the capital's most iconic venues, the O2. It's your chance to see the biggest names, including Carlos Alcaraz, Alexander Zverev and Ben Shelton, with more to be announced. Get your tickets for an unforgettable weekend of tennis at lbc.co.uk.
Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
7:33 on LBC. We're talking about Tony Blair, this 6,000-word article that he's written today, this essay, this novella, as somebody described it. I think it was on the Politico Playbook today. What do you make of it if you've read it? What do you make of the news coverage of it? And particularly I want to hear from you if you are a Labour Party member, supporter. Is it right that this article is getting so much criticism from people in the Labour Party? Doesn't it show a certain rudeness, I think, that if a Labour Prime Minister speaks out, surely Labour politicians ought to be listening to what he has to say? Or do you think, nope, he finished being Prime Minister 19 years ago, he's irrelevant to today? We have Adam back on the line in St Albans. His line gave up on us earlier. Let's hope it's better now. Now, Adam, you were, I think, going down the road of actually praising Tony Blair.
Yes, I was, Ian. Thank you so much, part two. The 6,000 words that Tony Blair has put together here is a structure of where things really need to be going forward. I believe it covers Europe, the Greenish situation, the welfare state, even to the point when we heard on the clip there with Tony actually saying, looking for a cross-party agreement with the Conservatives to deal with the welfare payments situations and obviously pensions. So the man is very balanced. I think he is someone who's come with this essay to give warning to all of us going forward. And I believe the rudeness from Wes and Andy shouting inequality, the people that will be drubbing Mr. Blair down will be, I believe, the far left, the ones that are calling for the inequality situation, be honest, Ian.
What do you mean calling for an inequality situation?
Well, basically, they're boohooing of what he's said into this about the green agenda, possibly not joining Europe, not looking at the tech side of the situation. They're looking completely for the inequality and to rebalance society as such, for which we're seeing tax raids, situations, continual payment of taxes on people that are working, and really bolstering the welfare state. And we all know it is burgeoning out of harm's way here. This cannot go on, but there is no sort of will or how to rein it in, I believe, and by the end of this decade, it's going to be unsustainable.
Yeah. Well, I think all politicians know it's unsustainable, yet few have the courage to actually come out with proposals to bring it back into balance. And I mean, Tony Blair, he talked about the pensions triple lock, which is a bit of a hobby horse of mine and indeed several of my colleagues on LBC, because we know that it's unsustainable. We're happy to say it's unsustainable, but you won't find a politician. I did hear whispers the other day that having U-turned on this policy, Reform are now looking to do another U-turn and come out against it. Well, if they do, I'll cheer them on, because the Green Party is the only one that has said that the triple lock is unsustainable. But even they want to have a double lock, although I'm not sure which two bits of the triple lock they want to keep. Adam, thank you very much. Let's move on to Clarissa in Battersea. Hello, Clarissa.
Hi, Ian. Well, I'm afraid I've got a very different take on it. Tony Blair. He lied about the Iraqi war, because I was in southeast Turkey working, and I was told by people on the Incirlik Air Base that everybody was on the alert for a March war. And when I went back, it was still debating, taking to Parliament time for weapons of mass destruction, when Tony Blair knew as better than anybody.
Clarissa, I'm not interested in rehearsing the Iraq war on this programme. We're talking about his essay
I'm trying
today.
To say he's a suave politician and he's a liar. That's all. You wanted opinions about Tony Blair, and if I'm going against it, why can't I?
Well, you can.
He was over the post office. You know, he's not the greatest guy that everybody's making out to be. That's all. You can say what you like, but I mean, I'm saying what I like. And you asked for an opinion on Tony Blair, and that's all I'm saying.
And that's fine. I completely get that. And I said myself at the beginning of the hour that a lot of people will never trust him again after Iraq. And you're sort of confirming that.
Also, the killing of the village shops and the rural communities by not overseeing the post office and taking away the pension books and putting bank accounts in its stead. That's a long-running terrible scar upon our rural communities.
And you blame him for that?
I do. He was in charge. He got up in the Commons on November the 22nd, 2004, and announced that everybody should have a bank account. I ran a village shop and post office in those days. I lost 137 customers in a week. And there's no more village shop in several villages in the place I lived.
No, well, that is true. Clarissa, thank you very much. Let's take a text or two here. This is from Duncan. This is about an ideology and political philosophy. Since World War II, the most consequential governments have arguably been Attlee, Thatcher and Blair. Since then, there's been a lack of the aforementioned, and it brings us to where we are and the electoral instability. Discuss. Starmer's problems are a lack of true vision, re-policy beyond his election rhetoric around change. I think that's absolutely bang on, Duncan in Cardiff. And you can trace this actually back to Gordon Brown, because do you remember in 2007 when he took over as Prime Minister, we all thought he had an agenda. We all thought that he knew what he wanted to do as Prime Minister. But he didn't have a plan. He had no vision whatsoever beyond him occupying the office of Prime Minister. And we all know what happened then. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Another text here from Jan, who says, Starmer has a much harder job as Prime Minister than Blair ever had. Starmer is curtailed by the money markets and the economy he inherited, as well as a bunch of idealistic backbenchers who don't seem to inhabit the real world. Blair had a reasonable economy that allowed him to push forward on policy. He also had the EU and Alistair Campbell behind him. Maybe that's the solution now. Alistair Campbell should stop this little-known podcast that he presents and go back into politics. Anyway, it is surely worth listening, says Jan, to any ex-Prime Minister to benefit from their experience. And he is definitely right that changing the leader is not the answer. And that was aimed at the backbenchers as much as anyone. That's from Jan in Camden. Right, let's go to Manish in Battersea. We're very popular in Battersea this evening, Manish.
Yeah, we've just been taken over by Tory council. Hi, Ian. Yeah, I just wanted to say, basically, I very much agree with Tony Blair. I mean, I'm a Conservative voter, but with his essay today, I haven't read it in the whole thing in full detail, but the summary I read, I mean, why are people harping back to the Iraq War when he's talking about the country in the current state? It's you know, it doesn't make sense.
Because there are some people in this world who are obsessed by Blair's, in inverted commas, lies over the Iraq War, and they cannot see beyond that. I mean, all prime ministers are remembered for one thing, and I'm sure when the history books are written in 100 years' time, that will be the thing that is hung around Tony Blair's neck. And many people would say, well, quite right too. But you have to look at a prime minister's record as a whole. And I still maintain, even though he's not my politics, I still maintain he was a good prime minister overall.
Yes, and even looking at, I mean, basically his essay today is about where the country should be going forward now, and that's what people should be looking at, whether they believe in that or not. Forget looking at the history. I mean, if he's doing something good for the country, why can't people just take it for what it is? And all these left-wingers who are sort of criticising him in the current parliament, let's be honest. I mean, are they just thinking about their votes for the next election rather than thinking what's right for the country? Because if the country is bankrupt, like Italy, I just saw their figures today, what is the point? We're not going to be able to invest in anything. So it's very short-term sort of views.
It is political reality that if you're an MP in a marginal seat, your main priority is to keep your seat at the next election. If you think that your party leader is going to make that less likely, well, inevitably then you're going to move against your party leader. That's core politics.
That's true, but then there is some people with a bit of intelligence out there who are voting, and what they're going to do is they're going to vote reform, because reform will address the economy. And I think
will they though?
Wasn't there that
will they?
It's the economy, stupid, isn't it? So I mean, in the end, it is the economy that will invest in our services. And with people like Streeting, and I mean, I've got time for him, and I think he's done well with the waiting lists and all that. But to not think about the debt that we're in, and the benefit bill and the triple lock and all that, which Tony Blair is mentioning. It just makes sense to me, that's all. They should listen to him. And I think Starmer, he may not be the most charismatic leader, but I think he's got sense in him. I think he will listen to him, hopefully, and why not?
I've just had a really wicked thought, Manish, in that if I was Kemi Badenoch, I would actually invite Tony Blair in for a cup of coffee.
Yes.
Imagine the havoc that would wreak.
Well, I mean, that's where, the party politics has to be put aside and think what's right for the country. But I totally agree in the end.
Do you know what?
Party politics will come into it, which is shameful.
When we finish speaking and we go to an ad break, I'm going to text her and suggest it.
Why not?
Such a stirrer. Manish, thank you for your call. Another text here. I always get complaints that I don't read enough text out. Alex says, it's clear that Tony Blair's comments on disability and incapacity benefit is tone deaf and not in step with public opinion. Backbenchers did not want to be involved in the democide on the disabled, I think you've just invented a word there, as much as you and your Tory buddies want to, with little scrutiny or detail of the plan of action. It's the failing discrepancy between politicians' views and the public's views. Well, I don't agree with that, as you wouldn't imagine that I would, Alex, because I think that I'm not going to comment on disability and incapacity benefits because they are absolutely vital to disabled people, and I'm certainly not in favour of ripping them apart. But the welfare bill overall, as we heard from a couple of other callers, it cannot go on like it is. We will not be able to afford it by the end of this decade. And therefore, it is up to politicians, those in power, those in Parliament, to come up with solutions. And none of them seem particularly willing to do so. None of them seem to have the courage to do so. And I think that's a crying shame. 0345 6060 973. It's 7:45.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
Tony Blair, candid, frank, frustrated, fed up with the Labour leadership and the way this government is performing and what it needs to do to find its mojo.
Get the latest episode of The Newsagents with Emily Maitlis, John Sopel and Lewis Goodall. Listen or watch on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
You've packed enough suitcases to know quality when you see it. Well, Saga Travel Insurance has been named a Which Best Buy. And now get 20% off when you buy before the 11th of June. Search Saga Travel Insurance for a quote today. New policies only. Standard and Plus are Which Best Buys May 2025. Terms and conditions apply. Over 50s only.
Up to speed.
Your Formula One podcast.
Round 6. It's the Jewel in the Crown, Monaco.
New episodes every Monday and Thursday on YouTube or Global Player.
The Hillary's mid-season sale is on, with up to 40% off hundreds of made-to-measure styles. Plus, for a limited time only, there's a huge extra 15% off everything. That's 15% off every blind, every curtain, every shutter, and our stylish garden pergolas too. Don't forget, with Hillary's, measuring and fitting is always included. So get window-wise and book your free in-home appointment today at hillarys.co.uk. But hurry, the extra 15% off ends the 1st of June. Conditions apply.
Here's a tale of two commuters. Steve was in a rush and needed to park near the station. Jane also needed a space and booked in advance with Your Parking Space. Steve had a meeting at 9 and panic at 8. Nowhere to park. Jane, she's already in the office and enjoying that morning latte. With Your Parking Space, you can browse thousands of spaces across London and reserve one instantly. Use the code GET10 for £10 off your first booking. Download the Your Parking Space app today.
Next.
Hi, just these thanks. Do you do cashback?
Just need to check you're not a robot first. New security policy.
Okay.
How many traffic lights can you see out the window?
2?
No, that's wrong.
Right, well, obviously I'm not a robot.
That's what a robot would say.
What a load of malarkey. Smarty keeps things simple, like 80 gigabytes for £10. And on a rolling monthly SIM plan, you're free to leave anytime. Less malarkey, more Smarty. Search Smarty Mobile.
Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
7:47. We'll come back to your calls on Tony Blair in just a moment. But first, the White House has said a report from Iran state TV citing a draft of an initial unofficial framework for a memorandum of understanding between Iran and the United States was, quote, not true, and that the cited memorandum was a complete fabrication. Well, let's get more on this. We're going to talk to Dr. Ahmad Al-Khuzai, who is a Bahraini political analyst and commentator specialising in broader Middle Eastern and Arab affairs. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I was watching rolling news about lunchtime when Iranian state TV said that there was an agreement in place. And then a few hours later, the White House said, well, that's simply not true. What do you make of these developments?
Well, Ian, this is not the first time this happens, especially since the beginning of this war. Many Iranian reports were broadcasted in Persian, basically about the progress in negotiations and terms in these negotiations that were never agreed on. The moment you see something that's broadcasted by them in Persian and not in any other language, that's a major indication that it is farce.
Do you think there's any prospect of the two governments coming to an agreement? Because they just seem to be so diametrically opposed. And if America doesn't get the guarantees that it wants over the Strait of Hormuz and indeed Iran's nuclear capabilities, I just can't see any prospect of an agreement.
I totally agree with you, Ian. Since the beginning of the war, we have to remember that the war erupted because the JCPOA never reached a proper agreement before. And here I'm talking about at least 11 years ago. And then basically, since the Trump 2 administration took over the White House, what they started talking about with Iran is about, first of all, the nuclear power, second of all, the proxies, third of all, human rights allegations within the Iranian continent. None of these were met. Since the war erupted, now we're talking about basically a growing list. Before it was 3. Today we're talking about the Strait of Hormuz. Now we're talking about basically whatever they did to the Gulf states and the expansion of whatever happened to the world economy and power supply. So it keeps on expanding. Where are we going from here? It's getting worse and worse. As you just mentioned, they are not going anywhere. The exact points that the Americans want from the Iranians is the exact, basically, held back or holding back points that the Iranians are not giving up, which means, again, just like you said, we're going nowhere.
Tell me about the atmosphere in the Gulf states at the moment, because they've taken quite a lot of incoming fire from Iran. I mean, are these attacks still ongoing, or is it all calmed down? How are people reacting to the current situation?
We took about 95% of the attacks. During the war, it was somehow scary, as well as uncertainty was the exact notion that everybody felt. Since the ceasefire, or the fragile ceasefire, took place, there have been lots of attacks, way much less than before, yet the Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, and Saudi are still somehow under minimal attacks, 1 or 2 drones compared to 30 or 40 before, which says a lot about the state where we are in at the moment. How we feel in the Gulf is uncertainty is number one. Number two, we are in a constant state of anticipation.
That's a very good way of putting it. Thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. That's Dr. Ahmed Al-Ghazai, a Bahraini political analyst. Right, let's go back to talking about Tony Blair. Ruth says the fact that the current administration has dismissed Tony Blair's current essay, which is actually very good, tells us how diminished they are. Anyone with an ounce of common sense can hear this. Maybe Starmer and co are frightened of him and his competence. Right, let's go to Scott, who's a new caller in Glenrothes in Scotland. Hello, Scott.
Hi, Ian. Great to speak to you.
What would you like to say?
I just want to say that this is probably the most sense I've heard from a Labour. Well, I know he's not MP anymore, but that Labour side in a long time. It makes sense that cutting welfare and supporting business is the only way out of the hole we're in. I can't understand why the MPs are not getting it. The only way out of the hole is by supporting business. They seem to have gone the other way. They're just ignoring the facts that are in front of them. We can't afford what we're doing right now. The only way out is through getting the economy going and supporting business. It just seems obvious to me. We're a capitalist country, but we can't be spending money we haven't got. I mean, I think Labour did initially try to go down the right route with cutting the fuel allowance. I agree with that. And also I agree with it to an extent. I think people who are earning, the higher tax rate shouldn't be getting the fuel allowance. And they also wanted to do welfare cuts initially, which they got a lot of pushback from backbenchers. So they cut that, and it's like they've lost the direction, they've lost the bottle.
Scott, thank you very much. Joe says, so Tony Blair is saying that the UK needs to strengthen itself to put itself in the best possible position in order to negotiate any potential future rejoining of the EU. I think that's what I heard, which sounds very sensible, says Joe. Well, if you think that we should rejoin the EU, clearly you would want to negotiate from a position of strength. So from that point of view, you're absolutely right. Lawrence is in Birmingham. Hi, Lawrence.
Hello, Ian. Great show as always. Great supporter of Tony Blair. I think he's one of the best politicians we've ever had. Unfortunately, the war will always loom large over his head. But there is a real problem in the country, and I'm a pensioner now. I've worked all my life and worked in some senior positions in companies. And the real concern is the tax take, and nobody's addressing it. Large companies used to employ everybody that was on their books that worked in their companies. That has changed round now. Multinational companies having 70% of their people working as contractors under IR35. They don't pay the tax or the national insurance they should. They register themselves as companies. They take a minimum wage. They make their spouse a director and do the same. So effectively, they're not contributing to the national tax take or the national insurance take.
You're talking to somebody who's in that exact situation where I have a limited company. I would love to show you my tax bill, because I can assure you that I'm funding most of the NHS at the moment.
Well, fair, I also have people in my family that are running companies, that are living in very large homes, running Range Rovers and paying themselves minimum wage and taking their salaries in dividends. Now, you know it, and I know it, Ian, this has become a very unfair society. If you are an employed person with a tax taker point of salary, you are in a completely different category to the people getting tax advice and ensuing tax avoidance. We look at.
Well, I'm paying. Oh, let me tell you. I'm paying it twice over. I pay corporation tax and I pay PAYE. So I don't think I'm fiddling the system at all.
No, Ian. I'm not saying it's a fiddle. No, absolutely not. It's legal. It's fair. Tax avoidance is completely inside the law. But
I'm not avoiding taxes.
Skewed. I can tell you, multinational companies in the automotive industry, I used to walk through the door and everybody from the policeman on the gate to the senior director was on that payroll. They were being taxed at source. National insurance was being paid. Everybody was contributing. Why should a member of my family have a very large company doing very well for himself, taking minimum wage, getting his salary on dividends and paying nothing like the tax take he would be paying if he was doing what is truly the right thing to do?
A lot of that has been outlawed now.
Well, if it's been outlawed, I'm not seeing anybody taking the law to the sort of people that are doing it.
Well, I can assure you that most people...
we've got to address it, the vested interests. Now, Tony Blair is one of the richest people in the country. From a meagre start through to PM, through obviously his think tank, there is vested interest. And this is the problem. Our politicians aren't really there for anything other than power and self-aggrandisement. We need a person in power that is actually truly not there to self-aggrandise themselves, but is truly there to take care of the wider public in this country. And unfortunately, if you can tell me of one politician that falls into that category, I will gladly vote for them, because I now do not, and I have voted Labour. I have voted Labour all my life, and I'm now 70. And I just do not know who to vote for. And I've listened to what's going on with Mr. Blair. It's all good stuff. It really is. But it's not going to solve the problem. Because if you're next to a guy who's in the category that I'm talking about, and you're going into work every day to earn your corn, you're never going to be able to afford what that guy can. Because it's a completely...
Well, it's the politics of jealousy. I'm afraid you're talking absolute rubbish on tax, Lawrence. I mean, as Francis points out here, this guy doesn't understand tax. I pay more tax than I would if I was on payroll. The dividend tax plus corporation tax is way more. So I think we'll leave that one there. Well, we are going to be talking a bit more about Tony Blair after 9 o'clock, because he's made some comments on net zero, which Ed Miliband will be absolutely furious about. So do stay listening for the rest of the programme, because in a moment, of course, it is Wednesday's Cross Question. And joining me on the panel for the next hour, Kirsty Buchanan, political news editor of the Daily Telegraph, who was also an advisor to Theresa May when she was Prime Minister. Alfie Sterling, director of Insight and Policy. Well, he's going to give us a lot of insight. I'm looking at him now. Over the course of the next hour, I'm going to hold him to that. He works for the poverty charity, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Emma Ravel is External Affairs Director of the Centre for Policy Studies think tank, and Richard Power Said, political commentator and former Labour Party official. They're here to answer your questions. I'm sure you'll have some questions on Tony Blair's article, but there's lots more to talk about as well. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
from Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock. Wes Streeting and Andy Burnham have accused Sir Tony Blair of ignoring inequality in his attack on the Labour government. The former Prime Minister says the party is playing with fire over the UK's future and lacks a coherent plan. Sir Tony's told the Newsagents podcast he's concerned about a change in leadership.
What I'm saying to the Labour Party is, first of all, you've got to work out what the direction of the country is that you want, and then you could debate who should be leader. What's happening at the moment is the absence of a real policy debate. There's no point in deciding on the basis of personality who leads the country unless you understand what's our project for governing, what's our purpose.
The government says it will continue to monitor the situation after Ofgem revealed the energy price cap will rise by 13% from July. That equates to £18 extra a month for the average household. Donald Trump's told his cabinet the US is not there yet on a deal with Iran. Earlier, the White House claimed a draft agreement put out on Iranian state TV was a complete fabrication. And resident doctors will go on strike next month. Members of the British Medical Association will walk out from the 15th until the 19th in their row over pay and conditions. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 13 points at 10,505. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.15. LBC weather, thundery showers pushing east across England and Wales this evening. Mainly dry elsewhere, a low of 7 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello and welcome to Wednesday's Cross Question with me, Iain Dale. It's 2 minutes past 8. This is your opportunity to question our panel of 4 experts, commentators, pundits on the latest issues in the news today. We've got Tony Blair, of course, with his article. We've got the non-agreement between Iran and America, plus lots more besides. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Let me tell you who's on the panel. To my left, Kirsty Buchanan, political news editor of the Daily Telegraph, former advisor to Theresa May. Next to her is Richard Powell Said, political commentator and former Labour Party official. To my right, Emma Revell, External Affairs Director of the Centre for Policy Studies think tank. And next to her is Alfie Sterling, Director of Insight and Policy of the, I think I said poverty charity, I meant anti-poverty charity, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. So, do call us on 0345 6060 973. The WhatsApp is the same number. You can text 84850. And of course, we're live on Global Player, the LBC app, and the LBC YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Right, let's go straight to a call. It's Charlie in Oxford. Hello, Charlie.
Good evening, Iain. How are you?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say?
So my question, obviously, is off the back of Tony Blair's publication. I'm just interested to know whether the panel feel that Tony Blair is right to suggest that Labour should align themselves with the sort of unclaimed radical centre, or is he just another ex-Prime Minister who, whilst respected by some, myself included, is now out of touch with the day-to-day challenges of the electorate?
Good question. I mean, he's been out of power for 19 years, Richard Powell Said, but that doesn't mean to say that he isn't in touch with the modern world, does it?
Not necessarily, but I'm afraid to say I don't think this was the most in-touch essay he could possibly have written. He is desperate to be telling us the hard truths that the British state and British politics needs to hear, but I thought it was just absolutely full of kind of easy false solutions. I mean, the most kind of obvious thing was not talking about inequality as not just Bernard, but now.
Well, this seems to be the narrative from the Labour Party. Oh, he didn't mention the word inequality. Therefore, it's 6,000 words that we can ignore.
I think if you're not talking about something that most people think is pretty fundamental and most people are absolutely furious about and most people think is absolutely at the core of the upheaval and the anger that people in this country are feeling, then actually you are out of touch and you're not giving us the solutions we need. Because the point is, if you ignore inequality, if you ignore the power of billionaires, if you ignore the fact that there are some people in our country who own penthouses and yachts and have
How
money
disgraceful.
and have money to spare to influence.
I mean, what an utter disgrace that we have a country where people can own a yacht if they're really successful.
And have money to spare to influence media and politics, whereas some people can't afford to pay monthly bills and can't afford to feed their kids properly. If you're not angry about that, and if you're ignoring it, as Tony Blair is, then the fact is you don't have to worry about other things. You can pretend that there are false solutions, like, for instance, complaining about taxes going up. Yeah, sure, taxes are going up because the cost of servicing government debt has been going up since the financial crisis. And yet he says, oh, yeah, the solution is what? Like cutting the welfare bill? Even Paul Johnson was screaming at him on Twitter today, saying that's absolute nonsense. The proportion of the budget that's gone on welfare has hardly changed in eons. It's false solutions, and it's kind of disingenuous, and I think that tells you everything about Tony Blair and where he is today.
Kirsty Buchanan.
I have long described myself as a radical centrist, so you will be unsurprised to learn that I looked at this and thought, what an awful lot of common sense this man is talking. Can I just tackle the inequality issue first, which I've heard both Andy Burnham has said and now Wes Streeting has piled in exactly the same point. Tony Blair didn't close the loop on this, but the prescription he was making and some of the solutions he was describing are in effect about tackling inequality. He talks about going further and faster on planning reform. Why? To build houses to make sure that people aren't locked out of the housing ladder and can't get the capital that they need to be able to invest in society. He talks about growth. Why does he talk about the importance of growth? Well, because from growth flows everything, tackling inequality, better public services. So the idea that he doesn't say the inequality word and therefore it's not shot through in almost every paragraph of this article, I think is for the birds. The other thing I just wanted to say about it is the big argument he's making here, and I happen to be reading The Failed State at the moment by Sam Friedman, very good book, and I can highly recommend it. And it's the same sort of argument. It doesn't matter if you replace one prime minister with another prime minister, even if their comms is better, if your fundamentals of your system is wrong. And the argument he is making at the moment is we have got huge structural challenges that we are not tackling because we have a short-term political culture, dare I say it, a short-termism in kind of media, in the way it holds politicians to account too, and we're not making those fundamental changes. So you can swap out Keir Starmer with Andy Burnham, you can swap out the whole of the Labour government with another government until you start to fundamentally have a strategic vision for the big challenges that this country faces. We're just going to be playing, round robin at the top with no real change.
Do you not agree, though, Richard, that what Kirsty said there about the lack of vision, is endemic in this government, which is what Tony Blair was saying, that there's no sort of policy narrative. And they've got the worst of all worlds, where they have a prime minister that even if they had a policy narrative, it doesn't seem capable of communicating that to the electorate.
I completely agree. There isn't a policy narrative. I think we perhaps talk about narratives a little bit too much in our political culture, and maybe not just enough about policies.
That's what Blair was saying.
Well, okay, but then it seems to me that it's all mostly narrative in his essay. Look, this government has increased public investment a bit. It's protected workers and renters a bit. It's not enough. It's not enough, and people are still very angry. And of course, the fact is that lots of the problems that we have can't be fixed quickly.
Emma.
I think what's interesting is, the question refers to is Tony Blair out of touch with the electorate? It's a 6,000 word essay that has been read by almost everybody that I've spoken to today. It's, listeners are ringing up and saying, I liked this element, I didn't like that element. We're debating whether or not Tony Blair is still relevant. I can't think of many political leaders, never mind people who have run the country, who could write an essay of this length. And whether you agree with his prescriptions or not, and I don't agree with all of them, you can't argue that it's not a very coherent, persuasive vision for what Britain should be.
Why is it people on the right who are seeming to welcome what he's saying today rather than people on the left?
I think the Labour Party has real difficulty bringing itself to accept that Tony Blair is the most successful leader it's ever had. He's the last person to win 2 general elections. David Cameron did, but had to go into coalition. It's not quite the same.
He won 3.
Well, in at least 2.
Somebody pointed out actually that Harold Wilson won 4, but they were split up.
Non-consecutive don't count. He really is the last political leader we had who had not only the capacity but the willingness to set out a narrative and govern over the long term. And I think that's what has led to a lot of the disruption, a lot of the confusion, a lot of the upset with how politics is now. It's very short term, as Kirsty said. It's very disrupted. We're going to have another change of leader probably over the summer, less than 2 years or just about 2 years after a general election. Tony Blair does, for a lot of people, mean a period of stability in British politics, even if you don't agree with anything he did then or said today.
Alfie Sterling.
I think Tony Blair was half right. I think that he was absolutely spot on that the big question facing this country is policy, not politics or personality. I think he was spot on that in the end governments and democracies get tested by their ability to deliver in people's lives and make changes in people's lives, and not by how snazzy the comms are. But I think the bit he got wrong, and in the end fundamentally so, was the diagnosis. What is the big problem facing this country? And I don't buy that the number one problem, the reason why people are so frustrated now, why they're struggling so much now, is about a technological change that hasn't yet happened. That's not what has caused the last 10, 15 years of stagnating living standards. The problem we have now, yes, is inequality, but it's what does it actually mean in people's lives? People don't have enough income to pay for the things that they need. And that's not just something now that's experienced by the very poorest, although it's most acute there. It's being felt right up the income distribution as well. I mean, look,
But hasn't it always been that way?
Absolutely not. So on average, across a given 10-year period, people should expect their incomes to rise by about £8,000, £9,000, £10,000 a year. That's the average we've seen since modern records have begun. Since 2020, if you run the last 5 years and look at the latest forecasts from the Office of Budget Responsibility, you have incomes going up by nothing, flat. And that comes after the last decade, which saw barely anything. That's the problem. People are much better worse off.
You're ignoring the fact there was the world financial crash. Then since 2020, 2 years of that, we've had COVID, which nobody seems to factor into any of the calculations.
So I don't think anyone's ignoring it. We're just describing the consequences, and that is the policy challenge that government has to face up to. I think the last government didn't face up to it. I think the current government is struggling to face up to it, and that's why they are each suffering from the same political turbulence as one another. And so when you talk about the political problem, it is the question of delivery in the current environment and the magnitude of that living standards and, yes, inequality problem. But when we talk about inequality, that feels abstract and left versus right. This is just a failure for people to see their lives get better, and that is why politicians are getting burned.
Right, let's take a follow-up call from Kamal in Birmingham. Kamal, hi, what would you like to ask?
Right, okay, so very simple question. I've met Keir Starmer in person, great guy. I personally think he's doing a good job. There's no way on earth I would ever work for Burnham, Streeting or Rayner. Is there, I'm a big Blair fan. Is there any possibility that Blair could come back as PM? Because I'm potentially a reform voter now. I voted for Labour previously. But if Blair was to come back, even as a backbencher, and was to come and put his hat forward, I would definitely vote for him and the Labour Party. And potentially, Labour are going to lose the next election. Let's be honest about this. But if Blair was to come back, I would vote for him, and I personally think he could win. Labour another landslide victory again.
So you're somebody who's
in the panel's opinion on that.
So you're tempted by reform, but if Tony Blair stood as a Labour MP, you'd vote Labour. That is an interesting one. Right, let's go around the table. What do you think of that suggestion that he might come back?
I think it's fairly unlikely. And I think it's also important to remember that although Blair had these enormous electoral successes in terms of numbers of seats, it was actually under him, especially in 2005, when vote share in the red wall started to fall, because actually he wasn't that popular with exactly the kinds of people who have moved away from Labour gradually over a long time.
He did have a majority of 66.
Well, like I say, the seats obscured the fact that actually Labour was losing its vote share. And, I hope I don't sound like I'm praising Ian Duncan Smith here, but the Tories didn't do quite...
country.
I'll get told off by my family when I go home. The Tories didn't do as badly in 2005 as it might have seemed by that.
And also, I don't know how old you were in 2005, but I remember it well because I stood in that election and it was Michael Howard that was leader of the Conservative Party.
Sorry.
Not IDS.
Poor Michael.
Are you thinking what we're thinking?
Alfie.
Well, I think we're doing exactly what Tony Blair said not to do, which is to speculate on the personality, on the individual.
It's so much fun.
It's good fun, but we're not in a great situation for it. I don't know whether he'd come back. I think it's incredibly unlikely. I also don't think that's the important question. The important question is whoever forms a future government of any party, can they address the fundamental problem?
No, but the one lesson you learn by coming on this programme is that the caller thinks it's an important question, so it is an important question.
I think the important question is, what do we do about the dire straits most families are living through at the moment? And I think that means a government...
Most? Really?
Yeah, most. Because on average, incomes are flat. So, and around that, you have more than... That's the median. So you have a huge swathe of the population seeing their real incomes no higher than they were 10 years ago.
That doesn't mean to say that most families would describe their circumstances as dire.
I think most families would say it's a dire situation if they have seen no progress in their living standards over a decade. I think that is a dire situation.
Emma?
I think Tony Blair's having too much fun not being on frontline politics. You know, he can still dip in and out when he wants to. He can write the essays, have the influence. Like I said, everyone's talking about him today, and he doesn't have to deal with the cut and thrust of Labour Party, policy or politics at Westminster. I also think the Labour Party wouldn't have him because, unfortunately, they have a very difficult relationship with their most successful leader ever.
Kirsty?
Labour Party couldn't afford him these days. I think is probably the upshot of that one. Look, I have in my crazier moments, and I wonder whether actually the next step forward, particularly if Burnham keeps on aggravating Tony Blair to get ever more involved in domestic politics again. It seems to me that there is a centre ground here which is almost completely being voided in the sort of pursuit of votes to the left and to the right and the shifting of the Overton window to a more kind of radical approach. And I wonder whether, if you look at the kind of values inflections between, the kind of old, what we used to call the Red Book Liberal Democrats.
Orange Book.
The kind of Blue Labour and the kind of David Gauke One Nation crown of Tories. I wonder whether you just create an entire kind of en marche, radical centrist new party funded by, and not spearheaded by Tony Blair, but funded by people like Amber Rudd, Tony Blair, to create with a really kind of...
So basically a German
leader.
Christian Democrat type party.
Yeah, something like that moves into this kind of increasingly vacated ground and tries to get back to the kind of common good centre ground of politics.
Well, Kamal, I hate to disappoint you, but all of our panel think that it's not going to happen. And I'll tell you another reason it's not going to happen, because Tony Blair, ChatGPT has just informed me, is 73 years old. You don't go back into Parliament. I'm sure somebody will come up with a suggestion of somebody who over the last 100 years has gone back into Parliament at 73, but I think it's for the birds. Right, more questions in a moment. 0345 6060 973. 17 minutes past 8.
This is LBC.
There's one green bottle sat on my fridge shelf. This green and white bottle that supports my gut health. Beautiful by nature, beautiful by name. It's the tastiest way to up my gut health game.
Beautiful Gut Health. Switch your yogurt to the UK's #1 kefir and give your gut and your summer a lift. Kefir is a source of calcium which contributes to the normal function of digestive enzymes. For verification of UK's #1 kefir, see beautifulguthealth.com/radio.
How likely is she to, have another heart attack?
Can I still go to the gym after heart surgery?
Is my mum still my mum if she has a new heart?
When it comes to heart health, no question is too big or small. That's why British Heart Foundation have dedicated cardiac nurses you can speak to by phone, email, or online chat.
Hi, this is Chloe from British Heart Foundation. How can I help?
Search BHF Cardiac Nurses.
Next.
Hi, just these, thanks. Do you do cashback?
Just need to check you're not a robot first. New security policy.
Okay.
How many traffic lights can you see out the window?
2?
No, that's wrong.
Right, well, obviously I'm not a robot.
That's what a robot would say.
What a load of malarkey. Smarty keeps things simple, like 80 gigabytes for £10. And on a rolling monthly SIM plan, you're free to leave anytime. Less malarkey, more smarty. Search Smarty Mobile.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
19 minutes past 8. On our panel tonight, we have Alfie Sterling, Director of Insight and Policy. What does this Director of Insight mean? I mean, that's a bit of a sort of wokey title, isn't it?
Yeah, stick to policy.
For the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Emma Rowell is External Affairs Director of the Centre for Policy Studies think tank, of course, founded by Margaret Thatcher and Keith Joseph. What was it, 1974? Yep. Richard Palisade is political commentator and former Labour Party official. And Kirsty Buchanan is the political news editor. I haven't heard of that title before. That's quite a grand title, isn't it?
It's a very grand title for a very ungrand job, I can assure you.
Right. Let's go to another question. It's also about Tony Blair. And it's a subject that we're going to be talking about after 9 o'clock. James says, is Tony Blair right that the government's net zero policies are a fantasy? And he used the word quixotic as well, which was interpreted as calling Ed Miliband a quixotic fantasist. She's slightly overinterpreting what he said. But I thought it was quite interesting, his views on this, because he's always been seen as somebody who's fully in line with the climate change policy direction of the government, but he seems to have got a real problem with Ed Miliband. Alfie Sterling.
I think it's very interesting for somebody who's so interested in existential future threats to then be so dismissive of climate change. I think it clearly is a really central issue facing us not just in the future, but right here in the present. And actually, it intersects with the thing that people are experiencing in all their lives right now in terms of the cost of energy. So our inability to have energy security at home through the sorts of renewable energy power that we have in this country has left us utterly exposed to global markets. And that is one of the reasons why the UK pays much higher energy prices than other countries, which is exerting a huge amount of pressure on families. And today, obviously, the energy price cap went up back up to about £1,800 for a typical family. So I think climate change is not just up there as one of the main issues coming down the line, like technological change, which Tony Blair likes to talk about. But it is right here in the present, and it's the thing that is pinching on people's lives in a big way.
Amber?
I think the fixation with net zero above and beyond anything else is the problem. I think net zero in and of itself is fine, but I think, as Alfie points out, people are struggling with energy bills. Maybe there are ways, fracking, North Sea oil, ways that we can improve our energy security at a time, when things like the conflict in Iran and, not wishing to do too much or any trade with Russia means that it's difficult to source oil and gas from across the world. We have domestic supply here. We could increase the security of that and help bring costs down. And Ed Miliband is fundamentally opposed to any conversation about that at all. I think that's what Tony Blair is referring to. We need to talk about the balance between decarbonisation, abundance, security when it comes to energy. I don't think you can pick one part of that triangle and go, this is the only one that matters.
Okay, Kirsty?
I think I was part of the government that made the reaching net zero by 2050 a legally binding target. And I think, obviously, as an aim, that's fine. But within that, there are carbon budgets every year and every 5 years and quite a lot of flexibility about how you get there. It is bananas to me that when you get to net zero at 2050, 25% of your oil and gas will still be used and still be part of the mix. And the only issue here is whether we choose to import it all from somewhere else with all the kind of emissions and cost and volatility that, or that we use what we still have in the North Sea. Is it perfect? No, but use it to be able to help bring down our energy bills, keep us more resilient and be part of the energy mix. It baffles me, absolutely baffles me, why Ed Miliband is so resistant, not just to new licences, but even Rosebank and Jackdaw. Now, Jackdaw is, I think, is the gas field. You could get that into people's homes within a year and help to bring their bills down. It is bonkers not to get in the way of that. The other thing I don't understand about this is I read, to get into Westminster bubble politics for a minute, which Tony Blair would not approve of. I read all the time that, that Ed Miliband is increasingly being blamed by Starmer for orchestrating the kind of plot and the internal coup against him. I don't understand now why he doesn't just take him and move him. If he's in end of days territory anyway, I'd move him out of the
Because he
department.
doesn't have the political power to do so.
What are they going to do to him that they're not already doing to him? He's in endgame anyway, so...
He's being talked about as a future Chancellor. Richard.
I thought that the section in Blair's essay on energy was one of the weakest, to be honest. He manages to get one thing right, which is that energy bills are too high, and then it kind of goes down from there. The idea that, that the only real policy that was in there was maxing out the North Sea oil and gas. But everybody knows perfectly well, I'm disappointed to hear, not everyone here, but everyone outside of here knows perfectly well that using North Sea oil and gas isn't going to help us with our bills, because North Sea oil and gas is priced at international levels. It literally cannot help us with our bills.
Well, yes, it can, because you sell it on the international markets and you get the tax take from it.
So that's taxes, that's not our bills.
It can be used to cut bills.
Well, then you could use any taxes to cut bills. It's
Well,
a meaningless,
exactly.
it's a meaningless
That's what
statement.
government is all about.
Well, then that's not the oil and gas helping you, it's just the taxes helping you. Also, the
taxes from oil and gas.
Also, the tax take is absolutely pathetic. You talked about Jackdaw. Jackdaw is going to be tax negative. The Treasury has acknowledged that. We are going to lose out on taxes because of Jackdaw, because of how the tax is structured on it. It's absolutely bonkers. That's how generous the subsidy regime is for oil and gas. You'd say, oh, maybe it could help us with employment. But if you lock communities into what is absolutely necessarily a dying industry, because the geology of the North Sea means that it's going to go downhill very quickly compared to Norway's. It means you're locking them out of being in the similar kinds of industries in clean tech where there actually would be.
You go to Aberdeen and sell this message to the
I was
people
about
of
to say,
Aberdeen.
this is not a dying industry, and directly or indirectly, 200,000 jobs rely on North Sea. So it's an interestingly dismissive attitude to such a large amount of jobs. And not only the jobs, but also those jobs that have transferable skills that when we continue to move towards a renewable industry, those jobs which are currently being lost because we're effectively mothballing and overlooking the North Sea and the opportunities it has, a lot of those jobs are now being lost to Africa, to Gulf states. They'll never come back again. We've lost all that talent and all that innovation for what? To worship at the altar of Ed Miliband's net zero idolatry. And that's not because I'm a net zero skeptic. I support it. I support the aims of it, but not at the expense of 200,000 jobs and Britain's future.
Those jobs, exactly the point is that they could be transferring into clean energy.
Not if you don't have a smooth and managed transition between one and the other.
That's exactly what you do if you invest in clean energy. But we all know perfectly well that if you are subsidising North Sea oil and gas to the extent that we are, then you're crowding out both private investment and indeed you're taking away from potential public investment in the clean energy jobs that we want to be moving those people into. And you're perfectly entitled to disagree with me on this, but I think it's really unfair and a bit rude to describe me as being dismissive about those jobs. I'm describing a really serious problem for those communities, which is that they're being locked into an industry.
Don't tell me I'm being
dismissive.
They're having their
I've
jobs
just got a
taken
different
away
view on
from
what's a
them.
good industrial policy.
They're having their jobs taken away from them because somebody else's one man's net zero idolatry.
You're talking about an industry which provides...
Unite Union wants to keep those jobs. This is not a left-right issue at all. Unite is running a campaign for a smooth and orderly transition. This is not what we're going for. We're going hell-bent to move towards renewables without actually thinking about how you manage that properly. And you take those transferable skills and you move them over time from one sector of North Sea to the other sector of North Sea, the future of North Sea.
This is an industry
if you lose that now, it's never coming back again.
If we max out on North Sea oil and gas, the absolute most that it could possibly benefit the GDP would be by a fraction of 1%.
I'm talking about jobs. I'm talking about jobs.
It was by a fraction of 1%, like 0.1%, and that's if you completely ignore the way that it would crowd out investment into other sectors, and if you ignore the fact that, frankly, you got wrong earlier, that it's not going to help us with our bills.
I think it's important to emphasise this point about bills, which is where we started, because fracking and North Sea isn't going to address that. I mean, that is just true. And so we can then move around via tax and industrial strategy back into the economy. They are separate points to be contested. But the starting point that fracking and North Sea oil will lower bills is wrong. And it's just basic capitalism. If a company... These industries aren't nationalised, by the way, if anyone has noticed. If a company wants to make a profit, they sell on the global market, and we pay the market price for those fuels. And if government wants to do something on prices, it doesn't need the few extra quid from the tax receipts from those industries to do that. It can choose to do that now.
Emma?
I just think that anyone who is sat at home thinking, God, this is a big jump in energy bills in July, what's it going to be like come December, is thinking, why are we not going hell for leather on every conceivable energy source we have? Yes, that includes fracking. Yes, that includes the North Sea and solar and wind and nuclear power stations. And we have not done enough to create a market in energy. We have subsidised, you talked about subsidising North Sea oil, we've subsidised renewables significant amounts, and they are still not able to stand on their own 2 feet because we have taxpayers' money propping them up. I think we need to row back from that, allow a proper energy market to develop, and if that does include fracking in North Sea along with solar panels, I think that's fine.
Right, well, you've seen the kind of debate we've had. We'll have this debate again from 9 o'clock, looking at Tony Blair's comments on net zero. We'll get your views on that after 9. But in the meantime, we'll move on to different subjects that possibly don't mention the words Tony or Blair in the questions. It's 8:30. Let's get the news headlines from Daryl Jackson.
The government says things have moved on since Sir Tony Blair was Prime Minister following his scathing attack on Labour. He's accused them of lacking a coherent plan and playing with fire over the UK's future. Matthew Perry's assistant, who injected him with a fatal dose of ketamine, has been jailed for 3 years and 5 months. Kenneth Iwamasa will also have to pay over £8,500 in costs and fines. And 9 people have now died in open water during the recent heatwave. A teenage boy was pulled from a boating lake in Hampshire earlier after going missing yesterday. LBC weather: thundery showers will push east across England and Wales this evening, mostly dry elsewhere, a low of 7 degrees.
This is LBC.
The following is from TfL.
My name was Luna, like the moon. I was 2 days short of my 17th birthday when I was killed. My killer wasn't a bad man. He had a rescue dog called Frank and rang his mum every Sunday. He wasn't a speed freak. He just thought it was okay to go a few miles an hour over the limit. But that was enough to knock me off my bike and kill me.
Speeding injures or kills over 1,000 people in London every year. Slow down. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, what you thought you were getting may not be what you ended up with. From unexpected site fee increases, running costs, a huge depreciation in value, many owners feel they've been missold. If you think this might be you, holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive the compensation you're entitled to. Text ASSIST to 78900 to find out more. That's ASSIST to 78900.
Now, listen carefully. I want you to think of selling your car. Who's going to buy that car? Keep thinking. Struggling to know where to look? On Motorway, there are 7,500 verified dealers who are ready and waiting to bid on your car. It's not magic, it's Motorway. Sell your car today at motorway.co.uk.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
8:33, with us on the panel, political news editor of the Daily Telegraph, Kirsty Buchanan, Alfie Sterling from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. He's going to like the next question. Emma Ravel is External Affairs Director of the Centre for Policy Studies. Richard Power Said is political commentator and former Labour Party official. Right, the next question comes from Timothy, who says, how should inequality actually be tackled? Well, this is right up your Strasser, Alfie.
I think at its most simple level, it is about rewiring the economy so it delivers for people in a more equal way. I mean, the proceeds of economic growth flow through returns on ownership, on wealth, and they flow through earnings from work. And so you want to flatten and even people's access to those things. That means getting people access to good jobs when they haven't got that access, whether that's about redistributing the economy geographically, giving opportunity through skills, but it also means making sure that earnings are growing faster, especially relative to returns on wealth. That's, if you like, the structural piece. But I think right now it's about looking at where are the fundamental pressures, and they sit on the things that people spend on as absolute essential items, which means that the poorest families end up paying a higher proportion of their income on them than richer families. So that's things like housing, it's things like energy, we were talking about earlier. And I think there is a real case right now for government to intervene in broken markets in a way that can lower inequality right now in the short term. So it's things,
give me an example.
So, for example, on energy, I think from the conversation earlier, I think we can actually be a lot more imaginative. I think this is a case where the market isn't operating well at all. We're paying monopolistic prices. We're exposed to global supply chains. Government should intervene with a different price regime. We already do it through Ofgem and the unit price cap. Government should have a block of energy that every household in the country can purchase at a subsidised rate. And it could go up for families with more children. It could be a bigger block for families on low income or disability benefits. But above that block, people pay the market rate. So the market still carries on going, but people get a subsidised energy block. That would make a big difference.
Has that ever worked anywhere?
Yes, California does it. Various countries around the world do it. It's not imagined out of from behind the sofa. Another example is pricing in rents. I think we should be stabilising rents while we wait for housing supply to catch up, and that means capping rent increases in the private sector so that people aren't paying extortionate rents relative to what they're earning. Another example of a failing market that could have a corrective right away.
Sounds a bit communist to me.
Why?
Well, telling private landlords that they can't actually put rents up when they might be entirely justified in doing so, given local conditions. I mean, this government, and indeed I think the last government did this as well, they have created a situation where so many landlords are leaving the sector, which, I mean, from a rental point of view, is not a good thing.
So it's interesting. So, I mean, first of all, most leading capitalist countries actually have cities where there are rent controls. So, it's clearly something that's entirely consistent.
And they've been disastrous.
They've
been very good case studies across the world.
No, and entirely mixed.
Not
You're right. There have definitely been cases where it hasn't worked. And Ian's right about the supply issue to come to. There are also examples where it has worked. So it's not the case that people dismiss them as not working. But I think you're right. There's this point, which is that if you get it wrong, you end up with landlords exiting, and that actually means there's less.
And that's happening now, isn't it?
So it's happening right now because of high interest rates. We've done some modelling, Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Yeah, both combined are adding costs. But you have to get the balance right in terms of then quality of housing. But if you look right now, by 2030, you're going to end up with a proportion of landlords who are going to exit because they're not making enough money. If you were to bring in a rent control and at the same time reform the tax treatment of landlord income, and by that specific I mean allow landlords to bring back deductions against their mortgage costs through the earnings they're getting from rent, but instead pay national insurance on their rental income, what you would see is landlords that are heavily mortgaged.
How on earth can you justify putting national insurance on rental income?
Because it's paid by all other forms of income. Why would there be an exception? Why would there be an exception for one form of income? And this is something that Nigel Lawson, this principle Nigel Lawson talked about in the Thatcher government. It's not controversial, certainly not communist, and it's something the IFS talk about as efficient tax treatment. But the point I'm making is that what you do is you end up with more landlords, the landlords that are most squeezed, who have got big mortgages, they end up with greater returns. And the modelling we've done shows that where you'd have a rent control and the tax reform piece, you'd end up with fewer landlords under pressure by 2030 than you would if you did neither.
Okay, Emma?
You'd also end up with fewer landlords. I think...
Sounds great to me.
Well, yeah, I'm sure it does. But that doesn't mean it's a good idea.
Something's got to be done with the flats and the houses. People will live in them, but they just won't be owned by landlords and who will be making loads of money out of them anymore.
People already live in them.
And they pay
renters.
Enormous amounts of money to the landlords, and the government subsidises it with housing benefit. People who can afford to buy them, probably because house prices would go down a bit.
So not the people who live in them.
The point is that the people who own them wouldn't be paying rent on them because they would own them.
Yes, but if
you're
having
the
your
rent to the landlord, and you wouldn't have this class of people who make money without doing any work.
I think if you think a landlord is no work, then you need to speak to some of them.
A corporate landlord, they don't do any damn work, and neither do their shareholders.
If you are suggesting that a lot of private rent is subsidised by housing benefit, which I accept is true, if you can't afford to pay the rent, how can you afford to pay the mortgage? What we need to tackle is the fact that we have 6.5 million fewer homes than we should have. Mm-hmm. The planning system is fundamentally broken and has been for decades. The same is true of economic growth. Inequality is more of an issue because we haven't seen growth for 20 years. What we need is an economy that rewards business, rewards entrepreneurship, fixes the planning system, not just for houses, for things like nuclear power plants and roads and train stations and all the other infrastructure projects, reservoirs while we're talking in a drought and a heat wave. We need to fix the underlying causes of these problems, not reach for cosmetically popular non-solutions like price caps.
Can I? So you're
just let Alfie come back and then come to
the point is, it's not either or. So let me just go back to the 101 economics of this. Of course, housing supply is crucial. You're absolutely right, and it's crucial over the long term. It takes time for housing to come on stream. There is a mechanical lag in the housing market that everybody who knows anything about it recognises, and that causes what economists call stickiness. Okay, so prices don't move at the rate they should do. That's where you can correct that market failure with price interventions. And when you said earlier, it just means landlords exit. It'd be really, explain why it is that if you have fewer landlords in financial distress, you have more exiting. Because that's precisely what you get if you have a tax reform and rent control, is you have fewer landlords in financial distress.
What rent controls also do is make it almost impossible for people to move. If you say to people, do you want your rent to never go up or to go up by a very predictable amount, people will quite understandably say, yeah, that sounds great, because that does sound great. But what it means is if you need to move out of your flat in Manchester into a flat in Birmingham because you've got a new job, the only way that the landlord can increase your rent is by changing the tenant. So anyone who needs to move to a new property is in a much more difficult situation. They're the ones who are going to be hit with the massive rent increase. It's cosmetically appealing, but the economics in the long term don't stack up.
No, you have cross-tenancy rent control, so it applies across tenancy. That's also very straightforward. The point actually is, if you have cheaper housing in cities, you have more people moving to where the jobs are.
Which is why we need more houses, not rent control.
Right, let's bring in Kirsty.
Well, to take up the point on more houses and not rent controls, you're 100% right. We're not going to change decades of chronic undersupply in housing overnight. But nevertheless, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't endeavour. I think, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think income inequality has remained relatively stable since the 1980s. It's wealth inequality that has really been exacerbated over the last few decades, and that is primarily because of a lack of assets and people's inability to get on the housing ladder anymore. I think one of the things that I find most frustrating about this government, and it has made some moves around planning, but when we talk about incremental change as opposed to real bold delivery, you've got a government at the moment that wants to be able to have planning reform, the sorts of planning reform you would really need to speed up housing, and yet it's pulled its punches on it. I want to see things like pre-approval so that you can have whole housing zones where NIMBYism can't get in the way of it and stop it. Southwark Council this week are celebrating the fact that they have blocked 800 homes in London, some of which were affordable housing. You know, we cannot continue to live in a society where everyone agrees that we need more houses and nobody wants them anywhere near each other. You know, if you will the ends, you've got to will the means. So I want pre-approval. I want really radical planning changes. And this government, more than a Conservative government for obvious reasons, or a Reform government, should be able to do. And if it's the one thing I'd want them to be able to do as a proper legacy for the next generation, the generation after, it would be this.
Richard?
I mean, I wish that the solutions to something like wealth inequality was planning reform. Even if we disagree about how it should be done, it would be really nice if it was that doable. I mean, you look at actually how and when wealth inequality at the global level has increased, why we've got a billionaire class who basically don't pay their taxes and have enormous influence over our media and politics, why that exists and why it's much worse than it was before. I mean, it starts with like basically the end of the gold standard. It starts with deregulation of finance. It starts with the massive flow.
We're not in for a history lesson here. Okay. The question is about how should inequality be tackled.
I mean, as a historian, I think
that wasn't the question.
You have to talk about financialization. You have to talk about the way that the economy has become massively financialized and we've lost industry and manufacturing to emerging economies. You have to talk about the fact that we don't have communities where people have long-standing jobs, so they don't have any power of labour bargaining. They don't have the power to demand better wages, and therefore trade unions lose all of their power. Though I know it's a little bit boring to talk about long-term changes and how incredibly difficult the policy solutions to those might be. But we actually can't understand why we're in such a bad situation otherwise.
But what would you want to do now? What do you think this Labour government should do to tackle inequality?
I think strengthening labour rights was a good start. I think strengthening renters' rights was a good start. I imagine that planning deregulation will have some kind of small benefit slowly. But my personal view is that it's such a bigger problem than that. Could we put up wealth taxes? Probably a bit. But yes, people will also move their money out of the country, unfortunately.
I mean, it's a good point about the long term, because I mean, all governments operate on a short term. They want to get re-elected. But Alfred, give me one thing that you think would be a long-term, not a solution, but not the solution, but at least a partial solution to tackling inequality.
Redistributing economic activity to the places where it's weakest. So our economy is far too concentrated in London, yes, the southeast, yes, but also actually in cities. And the fundamental long-term project has to be about spreading people's access to incomes across the country and not just in pockets.
Okay. Right, more questions, including our long-awaited fun question at the end of the programme. It's 8:45.
This is LBC.
5 across, full of positive swagger. Sorry, at HMRC we can't help you fill gaps in a crossword. But our new website can fill gaps in your pension and tax knowledge. Nothing cryptic, just simple explanations about the basics to help you get tax confident and understand how tax works in retirement. To learn more, search HMRC Tax Confident. Oh, that's it. Confident.
With the birthday draw, Global and ITV give you the chance to win a life-changing £1 million. In fact, the birthday draw is the only weekly draw where you can win £1 million for just £1. So, enter before midnight on Sunday from as little as £1 or via post at thebirthdaydraw.com. Is it your lucky day? From Global and ITV. T&Cs apply. 18 plus UK only. No purchase necessary. Verify at thebirthdaydraw.com/verify.
Feel every pass and every goal. Discover the next generation of televisions at John Lewis. Experience the full clarity of the latest RGB and OLED technology. Brought to you by some of the world's best brands. Price matched against 25 leading retailers with a 5-year guarantee on all TVs. Your best view of every game is available right now at John Lewis. It's football upgraded. T's and C's and exclusions apply. See johnlewis.com for details.
The Meal Deal Plus is now on the McDonald's Saver menu and comes with a choice of 1 of 5 bonus sides. Bag of mayo, chicken or cheeseburger with medium fries, a selected drink and a bonus side, all for $5.59. We're talking a mini McFlurry, apple pie, 4 nuggets or even another mayo, chicken or cheeseburger on the side. Now that's Saver satisfaction. From 11 a.m, not on delivery. Includes a selected Saver menu burger, medium fries, selected medium drink and a selected bonus side. Price and participation may vary.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
8:47. Kirsty Buchanan is here, Emma Ravel, Richard Power Said and Alfie Sterling. Right, a text question from June. Could the new Health Secretary, James Murray, who replaced Wes Streeting earlier this month, have what it takes to tackle the problems in the NHS? Now, of course, the BMA today announced they'll be striking once again for a week in June, from the 15th of June. Any of you know James Murray? Richard? No? Do you think, well, from what you know of him,
Yeah.
do you think he's got what it takes? And I mean, it's interesting that one of the first things he's had to do is now to cope with yet another junior doctor strike, resident doctor strike.
Resident, yeah, exactly. Look, there's a fundamental problem, right? Which is that we've got some very skilled people and we don't have enough of them and we really need them and they can probably go elsewhere. That's a really difficult situation for an employer to be in. It's not a situation that any government of any party is going to be better or worse at coping with. They're all in a really screwy situation as employers because their workers have got loads of leverage. Now, can they push harder as bosses? Yeah, sure. But ultimately, the doctors are going to get quite a lot of what they want because they've got the power.
But Wes Streeting, when he became Health Secretary, I mean, part of his pitch in the last election campaign was, well, the adults will be back in the room, we'll sort this out. He sorted it out by giving them a massive pay rise, and now they want another one. Hardly surprising, I suppose.
Was it the residents that got such a huge pay rise?
29%.
Okay, very nice. I mean, look,
well, indeed.
I mean, like all of the resident doctors I know, I'm afraid I know far too many doctors because my partner is one, are all absolutely pulling their hair out with the stress.
You didn't know that your partner got a 29% pay rise?
No, it's a GP. It's GP.
All right.
Okay. Look, all doctors are going absolutely mad and spare with the stress. They're all having a horrible time. They're all thinking about leaving the profession. Most of them are thinking about going part-time and doing something else with the other half of the week. That tells you everything you need to know about where they're at and how desperate they are, at least to get properly remunerated for the horrible jobs that they're doing. It's a really, really horrible experience being a doctor right now, and you've just got to expect them to carry on demanding better pay.
Kirsty?
Well, to say at the outset, first of all, I've had cancer twice, and doctors and nurses and anyone in the NHS are phenomenal human beings. Having said that, their pay has gone up 33%. Do I think they're worth it? Yes, of course I do. But I also think nurses' pay should go up by 33%, and theirs went up by 5%. They are now paid, I think, starting salary is about 40,000. I think towards the end of being at the senior end of being a junior doctor, resident doctor. Sorry, you're talking about 75,000 plus. You can make a lot on top of that in various different ways. So it's not exactly. I get it's a very difficult job, but we've got to be realistic about the state of the finances that we have at the moment and the world that we are in, rather than the world that we would like. And alongside doctors tearing their hair out, so I think a lot of patients who are seeing waiting lists impacted by this is the 16th strike that they've had, waiting lists impacted by that, their surgeries or their appointments being cancelled by yet another strike. I should think they're tearing their hair out too.
Okay, Emma?
I think I don't know James Murray at all. I've never met him. I don't know if he's the man to fix the health service. A lot of people thought that Wes Streeting was the man to fix the health service, because when he took that brief, and he had that brief for a while in opposition, he talked about needing to make difficult choices, having honest conversations about the future of the NHS, and people thought, actually, do you know what, especially on the right, it's difficult to talk about the NHS. You are attacked immediately for wanting to sort of sell it to the Americans, even though nobody wants that. That's a completely bonkers suggestion. It probably has to be a Labour health secretary who does fix the problems in the NHS, and there were a lot of people who thought maybe Wes is the guy to do it. He's obviously decided to step down for that role for bigger and better things, potentially. I think the problem is not that we don't have a health secretary who's able to tackle the NHS. We don't have a public willing to let them, because any conversation you have about the NHS, you're immediately attacked for undermining doctors and nurses, not respecting our precious NHS. There are deep structural problems with the way that our health system is set up that will not be made better by paying, resident doctors more, even though I can understand that as a resident doctor, given Wes Streeting gave you a massive pay rise less than a month into the new job, you might as well ask for another one 2 years later. Why not? The public are not willing to have a conversation about changing anything about the model. When we talk about waiting lists in the NHS, that's a feature of the NHS, not a bug, because we have to ration services in some way, and that's the only way we've got, because there are no charges for anything. When people possibly point out that other countries have social insurance systems and it is still free at the point of use and it still provides universal coverage, you are still pilloried, you are still shouted at and wanting to privatise it and sell it to the Americans, as I said. The public are not willing to have a rational debate on it. Therefore, I don't think any health secretary can really win the argument.
Which is a very sad situation, Alfie.
Yeah, I think it is a sad situation, and the big problem actually is that the pressure and the challenges the NHS are facing go far beyond what the NHS has control of. It sits downstream of a number of other things. One step up, you've got public services across the piece that are so squeezed that all the challenges are flowing back into the NHS and A&E, whether that's underfunded care, whether it's public health being cut, whether it's local government services and homelessness services. People are coming into A&E in greater numbers. But you go upstream one further, and it's back to what we were talking about earlier. If you have inequality really high, you have living standards stagnant, and that comes through in the population health indicators. And we're on the verge now as a country of living shorter, less healthy lives. And that is astonishing. After decades and decades of life expectancy going up and quality of life going up, we're now seeing that deteriorate. And all of that pressure flows downstream into the NHS, and it doesn't have the powers to resolve it, because it is a societal-wide and an economy-wide and a policy challenge across the piece.
But the point is, can I add to that? That those public health outcomes, which are the thing that we should care about, right? Like, health outcomes are the thing that matter, not like, any of the things that go into that. They're not to do with the NHS's model, right? The NHS's model was going alongside actually very good health outcomes compared to lots of other countries, definitely compared to the US. 10,
that's
15
simply not
years
true.
ago.
You look at cancer outcomes, and the US is you'll know this, Kirsty, far better than us. You look at European countries in all sorts of different areas, and we are way down the league table.
You're talking about one disease.
No. In other areas too, we are way down the European league tables in all sorts of different areas.
I'm just saying, I'm pretty certain about this. Health outcomes in the UK used to be fantastic compared to lots of other countries. You couldn't find a relationship between the model of the health service and the health outcomes. It just does. That's not a thing when you compare different countries. What you definitely do find is that
why has no other country
really
copied us then?
Sorry?
Why has no other country copied us?
Because the kind of thing that matters is the things like inequality, which have a much bigger impact. I'm saying that the model isn't the thing that matters.
Okay, well, shall we move on? Let's move on to another subject, because we've only got a few minutes left. Belinda says, will Keir Starmer and the government cop the blame when energy bills are driven up by Trump's war in Iran? Households will face the steepest summer rise in energy charges in 4 years after months of soaring market prices caused the government's energy price cap for Great Britain to climb by 13%. Under the cap, the average gas and electricity bill will increase to the equivalent of £1,862 a year from July until the end of September to take account of the rise in global energy market prices caused by the war on Iran, up from £1,641 a year in April to June. Emma.
Give you a quick answer because we've not got long left. I don't think they will cop the blame. I don't think people will attribute this to Keir Starmer, and I don't think they should entirely, because, as you say, things like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Trump's bombing of Iran, these have contributed to rising energy costs, and I think the public understand that and they can see it. What the government should take the cop for is not doing enough to reduce the cost in the things it can. It can't control Trump, it can't control Iran, it can't control Russia. The things it can control, domestic supply, taxation, green levies on energy, it hasn't done anything on those, but I don't think the government will get blamed for it.
Kirsty?
Well, leaving aside the fact that Trump's war was the worst idea since, I don't know...
Trump's last idea.
Trump's last idea and a spectacular military backfire. The reality was our electricity prices, our energy costs are staggeringly high. They're far higher than most other developed countries. That predates whatever madness Trump has dragged us into now. Of course, Trump doesn't help. Do I think they'll cop the blame for it? Look, this is a successive government problem, and when we brings us back to Tony Blair and the idea that actually fundamentally you need proper structural change of how we price our energy and take it out of that kind of globalised market, find a better energy mix and help to bring prices down. The reality is at the moment the drive towards renewable energy will eventually bring bills down, but to start with, it'll push them up.
Richard?
Actually, the drive to renewable energy has saved us something like 104 billion between 2010 and 2023, and it will have been saving us at least $1 billion a month during the Iran war. We'd be in a much worse situation if we didn't have a very significant chunk of our electricity coming from renewables. That's not only brought down the cost of our electricity compared to what it would otherwise have been, it's also brought down the cost of our gas because we've got lower gas
demand. But the question is, will Keir Starmer and the government cop the blame?
Oh, I think they'll absolutely cop the blame. They don't deserve it, but they'll get it anyway because they're in charge. But they're doing one thing, which I think you might have got wrong, Emma. Tell me if I got this wrong, but I think that the government has actually cut quite a lot of those green levies. They've put them into general taxation, which is the right thing to do.
But the people are still paying. That's not a tax cut. It's just moving a tax somewhere else. The taxpayer is still footing the bill.
It's moving it to people who can afford it.
Alfie?
I think government will get either the blame or the rewards for the quality of their response to our exposure to energy prices going up. Yes, it's a structural problem in the long run, but we've got 13% rise starting next month. The big question is what will happen to energy prices in the next quarter as we go into winter. That's when people have to put the heating on. If the situation in the Middle East doesn't get any better, if it carries on anything like what it's currently at, those prices are going to rise again, and rise again by a lot. There's already a lot of price build-up in the system further down the supply chain. And government will get judged for the quality of their response to that. And the sorts of response I talked about earlier, where government could intervene via Ofgem to have a subsidised tranche of energy for households to afford the basic energy amount they need to heat their home and keep the lights on, would be the right response, targeted in the right way and allowing market prices to sit above that.
OK, final question from Lucy. Morrison's has been overtaken as the UK's 5th biggest supermarket by Lidl. The natural question is, what's your panel's meal deal of choice? Where and what is their go-to? Is that the natural question? I don't know. Emma?
Tesco, because it's the nearest to my office, which if I'm getting a meal deal, I'm probably at work. Chicken, bacon, baguette, the sub, quite like. Probably prawn cocktail crisps and a Coke Zero, because I do have a Coke problem. Which I shouldn't admit on the radio, but I've done it now.
Well, depends what kind of Coke problem. Alfie?
I'm a bit of a conspiracy. Isn't the meal deal actually a real rip-off? Isn't it actually really expensive? I always find if I go to the other end of the shop and try and either buy the same things individually or things that are pretty similar in like a pack, you get it a lot cheaper. So I tend to stay clear of meal deal. Get a pot of hummus and a bit of bread.
Oh, pot of hummus. Now, there speaks a metropolitan elite there, pot of hummus.
Well, you definitely, if you have to have a fridge so that you can use it the next day as well. That's true.
Richard?
I'm afraid to say I think hummus might be quite widespread in this country now. You'll be shocked to hear. I do the really, really weird thing sometimes of buying that little plastic pot of 2 hard-boiled eggs, which...
So strange.
I mean, it's both a really disgusting object, which immediately makes everywhere smell really badly as soon as you open it, but also I could just boil some eggs at home and it just causes me so much guilt, and yet healthy snack.
Kirsty?
I'm perpetually on a diet, so I don't do meal deals because they all come with crisps and things like that. So I go out for a salad, which costs like £1 bazillion in London these days. My last salad that I got was £16.
What?
£16 for a salad. Very nice salad, I grant you, but £16.
Is that Harrods or something?
No, it's just a cafe round the corner. I mean, I was too, when you're too embarrassed not to pay for something.
It's too late, you're at the till.
Yeah, exactly. But I just wanted to go, are you kidding?
I swear by
Harrods meal deal.
M&S Foods, paprika crisps.
Nice.
Egg mayonnaise sandwich and M&S orange sort of drink.
I don't think egg mayonnaise sandwich is a bit
$6.99. No, because I don't eat it with people. I eat it on my own.
Fair enough.
Right, having got that out of my system. Thank you all very much indeed for coming on the panel tonight. Coming up in the next hour, we are going to return to the subject of net zero. Tony Blair's comments on net zero have caused, well, a bit of a kerfuffle today. He's had a right old go at Ed Miliband. In an interview with my colleague John Sopel, he basically called Ed Miliband a quixotic fantasist. Sort of. We'll play the clip so you can judge for yourselves. But net zero, I think, is going to become a really big issue for all the reasons that we've been talking about in Cross Question, actually. And it's very difficult for those of us that aren't energy experts to really get to the truth here. Because most people will think, well, if we've got oil and gas in the North Sea, we might as well use it. But it's not that simple, is it? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, Andy Burnham's accused Sir Tony Blair of failing to understand modern politics following his attack on the government. The former Prime Minister called for Labour to champion the radical centre. Sir Tony also urged the government to move closer to and smooth over relations with Donald Trump. Former Health Secretary Wes Streeting says the UK shouldn't just blindly do whatever Washington wants just because it's an ally.
When American presidents flirt with authoritarian leaders, when they undermine international law, when they embark on military adventurism. It's really important that Britain is able to act independently and in accordance with our own interests and values. If we're in any doubt about that, just look back to the war in Iraq, when loyalty to America replaced good judgment.
Matthew Perry's assistant, who injected him with a fatal dose of ketamine, has been jailed for 3 years and 5 months. 60-year-old Kenneth Iwamasa will also have to pay over £8,500 in costs and fines. He's the fifth person to be jailed over the Friends star's death. The family of a woman who was killed in a shooting in Sheffield on Monday say she was an amazing mother. Police say 30-year-old Shanice Brooks was an innocent bystander. She was shot near the 141 bar in West Street in the early hours of the morning. The Health Secretary has criticised another planned strike by resident doctors in England. The British Medical Association will walk out between the 15th and 19th of June. The union says it was hoping for a reset in relations when James Murray took over as Health Secretary a fortnight ago. But he insists the government's pay offer is final.
The offer on the table for this year is as far as we're going to go. It's 4.9% on average increase, over 7% for some of the lowest paid. And to be clear, that's on top of a 28.9% increase over the last 3 years. I think most people would see that as being a very good offer.
And South East Water says around 18,000 customers in Kent, including in Herne Bay and Whitstable, are still experiencing supply issues. The company says extremely high demand for tap water means their reservoirs are running very low. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 13 points at 10,505. The pound buys $1.34 and €1.15. LBC weather. Thundery showers push east across England and Wales this evening and tonight. Mostly dry with variable cloud everywhere else, a low of 7 degrees. From Global's newsroom, for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 9:05 on LBC. Now, Tony Blair has made quite a few ripples in British politics today with this 6,000-word essay that he's written. We talked about quite a few aspects of it in the 7 o'clock hour, which you can listen back to on Global Player at your leisure. But I want to hone in on one particular aspect of this article, and also play you a little bit of what he said to John Sopel about it on the Newsagents podcast earlier this afternoon, because he ended up by mocking Ed Miliband over his net zero policies. He accused the Energy Secretary of pushing a quixotic fantasy and said that China, the world's largest greenhouse gas emitter, did not care about Ed Miliband's beliefs. Now, I wonder what you make of that, because I think, look, everybody is entitled to their point of view on net zero. I think it is a good thing that we have something to aim at, but I don't think it should dominate every aspect of our public policy, which it seems to at the moment. And I think Ed Miliband at least has given the impression that he cares about nothing else but achieving the net zero targets. Now, in some ways, that's laudable for a politician. You set out your stall and then you explain to people how you're going to do it and what the benefit is to them. But I don't think the government have really done that. They seem so obsessed by moving as quickly as possible from any reliance on fossil fuels to a total reliance on renewables. Now, I've always taken the view that the most sensible energy policy is to have if you're going to be resilient as a country and be able to withstand any crisis, you do need to have access to all sorts of different energy sources. And I still think that one of those has got to be fossil fuels, oil and gas, probably way after 2050. It'll still form part of our energy basket. Now, it's been a declining part of our energy basket for some time now. And renewables are every year increasing. And I think that's a very good thing. I think there's a huge scope to increase the amount of energy we get from renewables. But we are going to need more electricity over the next years. So it's not a case of just sort of sitting still and thinking, well, we can just carry on as we are. Because if everybody's going to be moving to electric cars, for example, that's going to put more strain on the electricity network. With all these new data centres that inevitably are going to spring up because of AI, they are massive users of energy. So they've got to be catered for as well. It's incredibly difficult. If I had the money and I wanted to start up, I don't know, a new car plant, I got a brilliant idea for a new electric vehicle and I wanted to manufacture them in this country. How long would it take me to be connected to the national grid? I mean, I don't know the answer to that question, but I suspect it would be a lot longer than my business plan would probably advise. So I want to know what you make of Tony Blair's comments. Let's just play a section from the interview that he did with John Sopel from the newsagents a little earlier.
I'm not a climate denier and I'm not against clean energy. Great, you should have more clean energy. But around the world today, countries, including the three biggest emitters in the world, China, America, India, account for over 50% of emissions. They're all going after clean, cheap energy and electrification. So if we're going to pursue clean energy and spend a lot of money doing it, there's got to be a pretty good reason, and there isn't one.
Well, Ed Miliband, I'm sure, would turn around and say, well, hang on, we want to be leading the world in clean energy. Well, you wince as I say that.
But look, Xi Jinping's not sitting there in Beijing saying, I wonder what Ed Miliband thinks of our... Look, in the end, of course, renewable energy is going to be the future long term. But by the way, with artificial intelligence, you may well get developments in nuclear fusion. You'll get developments in battery storage. There's a whole new world that will come down the track at us. But right now, our energy costs are really high. They're imposing costs on business. We've got this artificial intelligence revolution that's going to use more and more energy. We need more electricity if we're going to go for electric cars, which again, we should do. And therefore, all I'm saying is the lens through which you judge policy should be cheap energy and electrification, because that's the way the rest of the world's doing it. And it's a sort of quixotic fantasy to think that because Britain's decided it's going with, by the way, under 1% of global emissions, is going to go down a different path at huge expense. It's quixotic to think that the rest of the world's going to follow that. It's not. And it isn't.
So Ed Miliband is a quixotic fantasist.
Well, the policy, I'm not saying Ed. Look, I wish these people in government well, but you've got to, when you adopt a policy like that, you've got to be sure that it fits with your circumstances that we are facing here today. And it's not that you shouldn't get to net zero over time. Of course you should. But we just got to realize we are spending billions of pounds a year. At the same time as we're raising taxes, we're spending billions of pounds to accelerate that transition in circumstances where the rest of the world has got a different priority. So for that policy to make sense, you've got to have a very, very good reason. On any basis, including the government's own figures, we're going to have a requirement for fossil fuel up and through 2050, right? Probably 13, 14, 50% of our energy will continue to come from fossil fuel. I don't understand why you'd shut your own fossil fuel industry and import someone else's. So it's not that I'm saying in the end, we should be, I'm not going sort of, in the end, it's all about fossil fuel. I don't care about renewables. I'm denying the climate reality. No, it's just about a transition that's got to be managed with some common sense view of what industry and the consumer and the country needs at this moment in time.
Tony Blair talking to John Sopel of the Newsagents podcast. You can hear that full interview with John Sopel by downloading the Newsagents podcast on Global Player. Now, we'll come to your calls in a moment because I'm very keen to hear what you think of what Tony Blair said there. To me, it made complete sense, but I suspect if you are somebody who believes that we should be moving as rapidly as possible, whatever the consequences, to 100% renewables, you're going to think, no, he doesn't really believe that climate change is happening. Well, he made clear at the beginning of that he absolutely does. He's not a climate change denier. But I think his approach to this is possibly a little bit more nuanced than Ed Miliband's. What do you think? 0345 6060 973. Well, Tom Burke is co-founder of E3G, Third Generation Environmentalism and Climate Change think tank. Tom, very good evening to you. Were you surprised by Tony Blair's comments?
Well,
Not really. I mean, he's been running this line now for quite a while, not quite as prominently as he's running it today, but he has been running it for quite a long time. And he may think Ed Miliband's a fantasist. I think he's probably quite uninformed about what's actually happening in the energy world. The Chinese are the people who are making the most out of renewables. They're the people who we ought to be following. We're not, in that sense, he's right. We're not so much giving a lead, but we are making the right kind of moves in the right direction, which is what Miliband is taking us. And all those sort of sweet words about slow down, just take our time, it'll all be all right. You know, he's picked a really good moment to be trying to tell us to slow down about climate change when we're in the middle of Climate Policy Failure, the movie. We're getting a really good experiential example of exactly what failing to deal with climate change means. And the carbon in the atmosphere just isn't listening to Tony Blair or anybody else who thinks we can somehow prevent this by saying stop, stop, stop.
See, I always find it hilarious. We had David King on the programme last night talking about a similar issue, extolling the virtues of China, and you've just done the same thing. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, which is the country that is belching out more emissions than virtually any other country in the world, that only in the last 2 years has China started to reduce its carbon emissions? We've been doing it since 1990, and we've done it more successfully than any other European country bar Sweden, I understand. So what is this obsession with telling us all that China is the country to follow?
I wouldn't tell you China is the country to follow for exactly the reason you've pointed out. It's trying to do all of the above. So it's trying to steal the future market for renewables at the same time as it continues to make the climate worse for all of us. That seems to me rather typically China and exactly not the kind of model for us to follow. What we should do is do what's in our interest, which is to get off the dominance of fossil fuel markets and their ability to hold our energy bills for ransom as fast as we possibly can. And that's the issue I think is most of concern to the British public right now. It's how to get away from the fact that we have people who have a stranglehold on fossil fuels, have a stranglehold in our energy bills. The faster we can get off that, the better off we'll all be.
But if we have these assets in the North Sea, Norway has possibly more than we do, and I mean, I don't think they're looking at doing what we're doing. They certainly have cheaper energy than we do. Why wouldn't we exploit the oil and gas that remain in the North Sea? Because it surely has to be an advantage to our country to do so.
The Norwegians are very well placed because they have lots of mountains and big valleys, and they are actually doing a lot of their electricity is produced from renewable source, in a sense, from hydropower. We don't have that same advantage of those mountains to do it that way. But that's why they're in a good position, and quite frankly, they're doing what we shouldn't do, which is to exploit their resource by making the world worse for all of us, by exploiting their North Sea reserves. And the government is continuing to exploit. Nobody's saying, the government certainly isn't saying we should stop using our oil and gas in the North Sea. It doesn't help us with bills because that's all sold on international markets and international prices. But the government's policy is to continue to use our existing North Sea oil and gas. What it's saying it won't do is develop new resources. Well, that's not going to help us with our current energy bills, because you start developing new resources, oil and gas now, and you don't get anything back from that for a decade or so. The thing about renewables, and the real advantage in terms of actually getting people's bills down, is you can do what we need to do faster and quicker and cheaper than you can do anything else. And that's the real issue. What is the cheapest, fastest way that we can have to improve energy security and keep bills down for everybody in the country?
But the fact is our energy bills are in part high because of the massive subsidies that have been given to renewables over many years.
That's a much smaller point of why our energy bills are high than the fact that we tie the price of our electricity to gas prices, and our gas prices are shaped by world prices, and therefore the war in Ukraine has been a major effect on that. We should be separating our electricity bills into the different providers so we don't let the expensive gas set the price war of our electricity.
Tom, thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Tom Burke there, founder of E3G. Well, we're going to come to your calls in a minute. Well, who's right on this? I'm not sure anybody's 100% right or 100% wrong. It seems to me perfectly logical that we should have a mix of energy supplies in our system, because, I mean, if you just rely on one energy source, you're always going to be in hock if something goes wrong. I mean, I can't imagine a situation where Britain is ever without wind, for example, but I mean, you never know, do you? So surely we should still have renewables as the dominant supplier, but surely we need fossil fuels and nuclear as part of our energy basket. What do you think of what Tony Blair's had to say? 0345 6060 973. It's 18 minutes past 9.
This is LBC.
Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and come on in to Classic FM Calm, LBC's soothing sister station. Find peace in the music with Classic FM Calm. Listen on Global Player or ask your smart speaker to play Classic FM Calm.
The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind is a bold and uplifting new musical based on the incredible true story of 13-year-old William Kamkwamba, who dared to dream big against impossible odds. Don't miss the West End premiere, playing now at Soho Place for a strictly limited run until the 18th of July. Book now at sohoplace.org.
Feel every pass and every goal. Discover the next generation of televisions at John Lewis. Experience the full clarity of the latest RGB and OLED technology. Brought to you by some of the world's best brands. Price matched against 25 leading retailers with a 5-year guarantee on all TVs. Your best view of every game is available right now at John Lewis. It's football upgraded. T's and C's and exclusions apply. See johnlewis.com for details.
Nothing beats a Jet2 holiday. And right now, we've got some great deals for you to make the most of. So you can secure your dream holiday and get the best choice of rooms and hotels. Book now with just a £60 deposit per person. Nothing beats a Jet2 holiday. Package holidays you can trust. Patronato protected. Subject to availability and conditions.
Iain Dale on LBC.
20 past 9 on LBC. I do think that energy is going to become one of the dominant political issues over the next 10 years, because it's quite clear that our energy prices in this country are higher than any other Western developed country. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I can explain all the reasons for that, but it is a situation that cannot continue because it is making us completely uncompetitive. And we're having companies who want to invest money in this country who are saying, well, we can't. Particularly, I mean, if you want to reindustrialise this country, as Tony Blair says he would want to do, and the government says they want to do, well, if you want to do that, you've got to attract businesses to set up shop in this country and be able to afford to pay for the energy costs. Because if you're starting a manufacturing business, inevitably your energy costs are going to be fairly substantial. So if your energy costs in other European countries are going to be, say, 30, 40, 50% less than in this country, well, guess where they're going to take their money? It doesn't take Einstein to work out the simple economics of that, does it? And yet our politicians don't seem to understand it and seem to have no ideas whatsoever about how to cut energy costs in this country. 0345 6060 973. But then you could say, well, look, after the unseasonably warm weather we've had in May, do you think there is a greater case for net zero policies, even if it does result in higher energy costs? Or is Blair, well, and indeed Reform, by the way, because that's their policy, are they right in saying that this is a fantasy? I mean, get Richard Tice on this subject, and it's quite a conversation. Let's go to Mark in Gloucester. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Ian. We've spoken before on other matters. Now, I come from the energy industry, the oil industry in the past, but my point is quite clear. In your last hour, some of your participants were talking about cheap renewable energy, and the government are always talking about it in the long term. Now, the facts are that all the contracts that are done with the renewable energy companies are done on an auction price, a strike price that is guaranteed, and the big 70-odd contracts that are out there right now, the strike price is at least 25% higher than the cost of the combinations on oil and gas that we have or have had. Now, if the oil and gas goes up, those strike prices, they can get more money for it than the strike price. And the new nuclear on North Somerset, when that goes live, that strike price is half as much again as today's production on the mix that we've got. And so that's locked in for 30 years. So please, can I ask, how is renewable energy going to be cheaper, especially when the networks needed to be invested to make it come to us are an added cost on top?
Well, you've kind of answered your own question there, haven't you?
It can't happen.
So why do all these politicians insist that it's the way forward?
Exactly. I'm not saying security, yes. That's nothing to do with it. We're talking about cost. It cannot be cheaper because of the existing contracts in place.
So we're in a doom loop, essentially. That's what you're saying. We're in a doom loop that we cannot escape from.
Exactly, because the contracts are done. However, what I'm trying to say is, why are they all saying it will be cheaper? Some of these contracts with the wind farms and the solar energies are 40 years.
And you can't get out of those contracts, can you?
Well, I didn't design the contract, but I mean, I doubt it, because the investors who put in the money to build the various plants that are needed are looking for a guaranteed return on investment. So they'll make sure the contract gives them that guaranteed return on investment. It's as simple as that.
Well, I don't like having depressing calls, but you've made me feel incredibly depressed, Mark, I'm afraid.
Well, I'm not a depressive person.
No, I know, I can tell.
I just wanted to put the other side, because all I keep hearing is renewals will be cheaper.
And this is the thing. If you are on the left of British politics and you are maybe you're a supporter of the Green Party, of course you're going to say that sort of renewable energy is the way forward. I completely get that. But I wonder how many of its advocates actually understand the way the pricing system works in the way that you've explained. And I have absolutely no doubt that you're 100% right in the way that you've explained it.
Well, I am, I'm sure. I mean, I know I am. I mean, because I've been involved with various aspects of it in my recent past. So all I know is that I just can't keep balancing what I know in reality against what the politicians, the pundits, and you have one or two on just before 9, saying renewables are cheaper. And I'm going, how?
Yeah.
Which prompted my call.
Well, they will presumably, their argument would be, well, because we've got waves, it doesn't cost, wave power can't cost much. We've got sun coming down on solar panels, so that's quite cheap. We've got wind for wind turbines. But we don't. So there's a lot less cost of that than the digging up the oil out of the North Sea. That's their argument, presumably. Absolutely,
but we've agreed that for these companies to develop what they've already developed, let alone new technologies like wave, what happens is the government goes out to tender on these things, and a price is agreed. It's called a strike price.
Yeah.
Okay, then, and the strike prices have been well in excess of the existing mix. However, I would like to say that in recent months, the new strike prices, the very latest ones, are slightly lower because the cost of producing solar panels and wind turbines and that has reduced, and it's more equitable to, say, building a new gas-powered station. Okay, then, so it is more, but we're already locked into 70 big cost ones.
OK, Mark, thank you very much indeed. I found that call really educational, I have to say. I mean, I did know about the strike price, but he's explained it, I think, in very, very simple terms. But as I said during the call, I mean, if he's right, we're on a doom loop, aren't we? We can't get out of these contracts. Andrew says, on your net zero discussion, can I kindly suggest that you start at the very beginning and see if you can get a consensus of the definition of net zero? It should be clear to all that Miliband is crushing the economy for the sake only of his own narcissistic legacy. Well, the way he's, I mean, you've put it in fairly lurid terms there, but the way he's going, the legacy will not be a positive one, because there are already so many companies who have either gone out of business or are about to go out of business because of the cost of energy. And if the government doesn't come up with some sort of solution there, I mean, from an electoral point of view, it's going to be a disaster, because if we continue with these, the energy price cap going up by hundreds of pounds each quarter, I mean, this latest hike, 13%. Now, that's not the government's fault. That is due to the war on Iran. So you can't really blame them for that. But people blame the government for everything, no matter what the justification. Joe says, I think Tony Blair is being deliberately disingenuous and pushing a pro-fossil fuel line. He cannot possibly believe that North Sea gas and oil, which is sold by private companies on international markets, will make a jot of difference to our UK domestic energy. Well, why on earth would it not make a jot of difference, as you put it, to our UK domestic energy? I don't see the logic of what you're saying there. They say it is not our gas and oil because it's licensed to private companies. Yes, and those companies have to pay for the privilege of being able to drill in the North Sea. So we do get money from that. And that's money that can be used, if the government chooses to do so, to cut bills for sections of society. That's what government is all about, isn't it? Raising money through taxation and then deciding on how it's spent. There's no law that says a government has to spend money on X, Y, or Z. It's up to them to make that choice, and then it's up to us to judge them on the choices that they make. And Joe finishes by saying, also, fossil fuels are still subsidised. Yeah, just like renewables are as well. It's 9:30 on LBC. News headlines with Darryl Jackson.
Wes Streeting and Andy Burnham have accused Sir Tony Blair of ignoring inequality in his attack on the Labour government. The former Prime Minister warned of prioritising politics over policy amid calls for a change in leadership. Police say a 30-year-old mother of one who was shot and killed in Sheffield on Monday was an innocent bystander. She's been identified as Shanice Brooks. And Donald Trump has told his cabinet there's still work to do before a peace deal with Iran can be reached. Earlier, Iranian state media claimed there's a draft agreement in place that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz, but Washington has denied that. LBC weather, thundery showers push east across England and Wales this evening and tonight. Mostly dry with variable amounts of cloud elsewhere, lows of 7 degrees.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
The Great British Summer Savings Scheme? I just can't see this.
Straight to the point.
Are we witnessing Labour tear itself apart over Europe?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Clearly a number of parents have no attempt to try and rein in their children.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store. LBC.
Get 100 to 1 on England to lift the trophy when you sign up to Bet Victor. Opt in and deposit a £5. Maximum stakes £1. Good luck and come on England.
We simply remember our favourite things and then we'll feel so glad.
For all your favourite things, visit Bet Victor. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. Enhanced winnings paid in free bets and expire in 7 days. Offer expires 12 p.m. 29th of June 2026. Gambleaware.org.
With Halfords, this summer is about doing more. More days out, more last-minute plans. And with roof boxes and bike racks fitted in store, there's room for it all. Make sure your car is adventure-ready with a 10-point car check. And stay prepped for whatever the British weather throws your way with aircon checks and wiper blades fitted in store. Our experts are on hand with anything you need. So shop online or in store and get out there with Halfords. Services subject to availability. Full T's and C's apply. See halfords.com for details.
Buying a home on a holiday park was the retreat you always wanted. But then came unexpected site fee increases. And that was before the dramatic loss in value. If you bought a home on a holiday park in the UK, you may have been missold. holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive thousands in compensation. Text ASSIST to 78900. That's ASSIST to 78900.
Iain Dale on LBC.
9:33 on LBC. Now, the Attorneys General of New York and New Jersey have said that they've issued a subpoena to FIFA over the soccer governing body's ticket practices after media reports raised concerns about fan seats locations for the upcoming World Cup. New York Attorney General Letitia James and New Jersey Attorney General Jennifer Davenport said in a press release they're specifically requesting details about ticketing practices for the 8 World Cup matches being played in New Jersey, including the July the 19th final. The two officials also said some fans have reported that they did not receive the tickets in the category they paid for. According to the press release, some fans who selected and paid for Category 1 tickets, which were the closest areas to the field, were assigned seats further back in Category 2 areas. Well, where is this going to lead? There is only one person to talk to at times like this, and it is Kieran Maguire, co-host of the Price of Football podcast, which remains the only podcast I religiously listen to every single week. In fact, twice a week. Kieran, welcome. Now,
thanks, Ian. You've been in the post.
You've been talking a lot on the podcast recently about the World Cup and particularly the ticketing practices. Now, this is a new one where the Attorneys General aren't complaining necessarily about the cost of the tickets, even though you and I both would do that. They're talking about the fact that people aren't getting the tickets they paid for. Now, what have you heard about this before?
Yes, I have been made aware of this. It does appear to be a potential sleight of hand by FIFA. They want to maximise revenues. I think Gianni Infantino's made that very clear, and therefore offering tickets which would appear to be position A. You want to be as close to the halfway line as possible. There's no doubt that gets the best view. It's the television gantry view to a certain extent is desirable, and then fans are finding that they're being allocated what was initially deemed to be a Category 2 or 3 seat, and some of them you're going to need oxygen to see the pitch from. Some of the seats are very, very far away from the action, and if you've paid top dollar prices, which as we've established is a separate issue, I can imagine the frustration.
So how much would these Category 1 tickets have cost the normal punter? Because, I mean, we're used to ticketing prices going up quite a lot in this country over the last few years, but it's rare that you're going to spend more than £120 on a Premier League match. But these are going for thousands, aren't they?
That's right. I went onto the FIFA app earlier because there's no football taking place tonight. And if you want to go and see Scotland versus Haiti, that's $1,000, and that's behind the net. And for England's first match against Croatia, again, it's over $2,000. This is from the FIFA website. If you want tickets at Category 1, you can double those prices. So it does seem very challenging. The average earnings of an individual in Haiti is $1,100 a year. $1,000 for a football ticket is indicative of just how out of touch the organisation seems to be with grassroots football fans.
I could get you into so much trouble for something you've just said, because you just said there is no football on tonight. Which team does your co-host Kevin Day support on the podcast?
Is it some small club in South London?
It is Crystal Palace, who are playing in the final of the Conference League tonight, and you're not watching it.
Oh, wow. If you think I'd rather go to a garden centre, Ian. Have you seen my garden?
No, I have seen your garden. I think that Kevin will be most perplexed by this turn of events. Now, Palace are winning, by the way, 1-0. Just while you're on, obviously you know that I'm a West Ham supporter, and I know you were on LBC a couple of days ago when we got relegated. But just for my fellow West Ham fans who are listening now, I mean, how much of a disaster financially is relegation going to be? Because we hear all sorts of rumours that they need to essentially raise £150 million in transfer fees for existing players. Is that right, do you think?
Well, yes, they owed £190 million in instalments at the end of 2025 for players that they'd have already recruited. Now, there have been further recruits since then. So West Ham do have a very significant financial obligation. They lost £100 million in season 24-25 as well. I think the accounts have looked slightly better than they would have done had the Declan Rice sale papered over the cracks in terms of the company's operational challenges, and therefore they're going to the Championship with a big financial black hole. It's either going to be filled by player sales or they're going to have to raise some form of finance. Could they get that externally? Unlikely. Their overdraft is due for repayment at the end of July from I think from Barclays. They've borrowed around about £100 million from an offshore company, and therefore I think the only other alternative would be to go to the owners themselves, David Sullivan and Daniel Kretinsky, both of whom are individually very wealthy, and ideally borrow money or have new shares issued in the club, which will provide the working capital that they require next year.
And it seems interesting that Daniel Kretinsky seems to be getting the upper hand in terms of control of the club because, as I understand it, David Sullivan wanted to get rid of the manager, Nuno Espirito Santo, and Daniel Kretinsky vetoed it, and they've now announced that he is going to stay, which I think most West Ham fans will find rather perplexing.
Yes. When you've got two people with an equal status in the club, and that appears to be the direction of travel. The estate of David Gold is going to be sold, I believe, to David Sullivan and Daniel Kretinsky, so that they end up with equal shares in West Ham. You've got to have two people that are rowing in the same direction. And the fact that they are already falling out doesn't bode well. You've got to get the strategy right at the club rather than have internal boardroom battles.
Can I just say, by way of saying goodbye, that you haven't cheered me up in the latter part of this conversation, Kieran? That was your aim, and I'm afraid you failed.
I'm terribly sorry, Ian. I'll make it up to you in Edinburgh.
Oh yes, I should say, yeah, we're doing my guests at the Edinburgh Fringe, Price of Football podcast, Kevin Day and Kieran Maguire. I think is it on the Tuesday? I can't remember.
Tuesday the 11th of August.
Tickets available from the Edinburgh Fringe website. Kieran, thank you very much indeed. That's Kieran Maguire there, co-host of the Price of Football podcast. Right, let's go back to the subject of net zero. Now, just for you, in the news there, I looked up the definition of net zero. This is what ChatGPT tells me, so it must be true. It says, net zero is the state in which the amount of greenhouse gases added to the atmosphere is balanced by the amount removed from it. In practice, it usually means cutting emissions as much as possible from energy, transport, industry, farming, etc., removing or offsetting the remaining emissions through methods such as tree planting or carbon capture. So a country, company or individual reaches net zero when their total emissions minus total removals equals zero. The term is most commonly used in relation to carbon dioxide, but formally covers all major greenhouse gases, including methane and nitrous oxide, usually measured as carbon dioxide equivalents. It does go on, but I won't go on to the rest of it. I just thought it was important to sort of make that clear after that text that we had earlier. And in case you think that Britain doesn't do very well on net zero, we actually really do. Since 1992, we have removed more carbon emissions from our atmosphere than any other European country apart from Sweden. Now, I mean, that is an achievement, isn't it? Yeah. How often do we hear that? The only time I ever hear it is when I say it on this programme. And I'm sure there'll be people who know that can't be true. I'm sure the Germans are much better. No, they're not. And sometimes we ought to sort of blow our own trumpets a bit and say we have got something right. Right, let's go to Paul in an unpronounceable place in Marazion. Is that how you pronounce it, Paul?
Marazion.
No, I knew I'd get it wrong. Right, what would you like to say?
And we look out at St Michael's Mount.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Someone had written into you, that you quoted in the last segment of the programme, saying that any gas extracted from the North Sea would be sold on the global market. That's just not true, Ian. 85 to 90% of all the gas ever extracted from the North Sea has been used in Britain. We ship a little bit to Belgium and Holland and supply Ireland. Other than that, we don't have a facility in Britain to compress and liquefy gas for shipping around the world. It simply doesn't exist, and a plant to do so would cost billions and billions of pounds. That's why they're in Qatar and in America and whatever. And the fact is, there is no global price for gas. Gas prices are local around the world. It's why gas in America is a quarter of the price it is in Britain. But the people that you have who support all this nonsense, they constantly say, oh, we'll have to pay the global gas price and whatever. There is no global gas price like there is for oil. Oil has worldwide prices that you see on markets. Gas prices are local.
But the local prices still reflect the international prices, don't they? Because, I mean...
the American price is a quarter of what we pay here. That's not reflecting the worldwide prices.
So, but if... hang on a second. You can't be totally right on that, because after sanctions were imposed on Russia and Europe couldn't import gas from Russia, naturally the prices shot up.
Yeah, but what America will sell us gas for and what they charge for it locally in America is completely different. They're not going to do us any great favours by selling it to us at the same price as they sell it in America. It's a fact that the gas price in America is about 25% of what it is here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's not global price. It's not like oil. A barrel of oil costs you the same pretty much wherever you are in the world. Gas prices are local, and they reflect local supply. And when they say, well, they just ship the gas off and sell it around the world wherever they could get the best price. No, they won't. We don't have the facilities to do that in Britain. Gas extracted from the North Sea would be piped ashore in Britain and overwhelmingly used in Britain.
But we also don't have any gas storage facilities anymore, do we?
No, we just have to pump it in as we needed it, and, regulate it so that it just arrived as it was needed. We've done stupid things with infrastructure where we can't store it and whatever. We closed the rough gas storage facility in the North Sea for whatever reason. I don't know. British Gas wouldn't pay, the government wouldn't pay British Gas to maintain it. And we've done mad things. But, what do you do?
So your contention is basically that we would be mad to stop gas production in the North Sea.
Well, they say that it's all completely depleted and whatever. Well, of course, if you don't drill any new wells and explore for it, of course reserves have fallen. But you have to keep drilling and explore and find new basins and whatever. And that's what the Norwegians are doing. You don't hear the Norwegians saying it's 93% depleted, do you?
No, you don't. And this is what gets me, in that we always seem to praise the Norwegians for all sorts of different things, including all their energy production. And yet we've got the opportunity to do exactly the same thing that the Norwegians are doing. And yet we're told we're wicked people for wanting to exploit our oil and gas reserves in the North Sea. I don't see it that way. I'm not somebody who thinks that net zero is completely rubbish. I think we should be moving towards net zero, but you can't do it overnight. And you should not get obsessed by it to the extent that it just governs every single part of your energy policy.
And this thing where they say that renewables are cheaper, no, they're not, because they have to have a conventional backup system for when it's not windy or sunny or whatever. But they don't take that cost of having the backup system into account. You have to maintain this complete separate generation system to provide when there's no wind and no sun. And it's just the economics of the madhouse. And it's the whole market is rigged. You look at this carbon balancing tax that we have in Britain. Just put it into Gemini AI and it will tell you. It's not me telling you this. that it's only done for the single purpose of making renewables look competitive.
OK, Paul, thank you very much. John says it was the Tory Prime Minister Theresa May who got rid of our gas storage facilities. You're absolutely right on that, John. Wouldn't deny that for a second. In fact, I think it was, if I'm right, Liz Truss who made the decision on that when she was in Theresa May's cabinet. She has a lot to answer for, doesn't she? 0345 6060 973. What are your views on net zero, and what do you think of what Tony Blair has said about net zero? It's 9:48.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
Tony Blair pops up with a lengthy attack on Keir Starmer's government. Is he somebody we should be paying attention to? Plus, more Brits are turning to Nigeria to find surrogate mothers. Do you have any issue with that?
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Shutter sales don't come much bigger than the Hillary's Big Shutter Sale. And there are big savings to match, with up to 40% off hundreds of made-to-measure shutters, all with a 10-year guarantee as standard. Plus, for a limited time only, there's a huge extra 15% off everything. Your Hillary's Shutter specialist will take care of the measuring and fitting for a flawless finish. So get window-wise and book your free in-home appointment today at hillarys.co.uk. But hurry, the extra 15% off ends the 1st of June. Conditions apply.
Experience. It's knowing the difference between a good deal and, well, a great deal. Saga Travel Insurance covers most pre-existing medical conditions and has been named a Which Best Buy. Smart choice. And right now you can get 20% off travel insurance until the 11th of June. Search Saga Travel Insurance for a quote today. New policies only, subject to medical screening. Standard and Plus are Which Best Buys May 2025. Terms and conditions apply. Over 50s only.
Here's a tale of two commuters. Steve was in a rush and needed to park near the station. Jane also needed a space and booked in advance with Your Parking Space. Steve had a meeting at 9 and panic at 8. Nowhere to park. Jane, she's already in the office and enjoying that morning latte. With Your Parking Space, you can browse thousands of spaces across London and reserve one instantly. Use the code GET10 for £10 off your first booking. Download the Your Parking Space app today.
Dear passengers, this is the final boarding call for all those whose minds are already elsewhere. Taking in the skyline of Hong Kong, feeling the energy of Mumbai, walking the historic streets of Boston, or heading out on safari near Johannesburg.
Wherever your mind is right now, we'll take you there. Discover the world with Swiss. Book your flight on swiss.com.
This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 10 to 10 on LBC. Let's take a text here before we go back to your calls. I'm a Labour Party member and I'm sick of this denigration of net zero by Tony Blair. I'm sold on energy efficiency. I really loved Rebecca Long-Bailey's Green New Deal policy too. It's the future. Well, she was the future once. That's me, not a texter, Helen from Lancashire. And she finishes off by saying Tony Blair is yesterday's man. David is on the line in Putney. Is he yesterday's man, Tony?
I mean, I've got a lot to say about him.
David.
So
go on.
I've got a lot to say about him, so I would say yes, I agree in that contention. I think I've been trying for this entire hour to figure out what my angle would be, because from the get-go I was like, no, I disagree. And gradually I've been trying to figure out why I disagree. And I think I don't necessarily agree with him. I just want to disagree with him. I think the conversation on nuclear energy isn't talked about enough, and I like how renewables was talked down by bringing up solar and wind energy and the sunny and windiness of the UK. But if we go to the conversation about data centers that was brought up and AI, everyone keeps talking about it. We have, I think it was Google, recently opened a geothermal energy production site over in America to power an entire data center. And it is arguably one of the most impressive pieces of innovation for the purposes of data centers. I'm very anti-AI as well. But the conversation on nuclear energy is what the UK needs more than anything. Geographically speaking, solar and wind energy is not feasible. Tidal energy, again, not feasible.
What do you mean not? Hang on a second. What do you mean that solar and wind energy aren't?
Temperamental nature.
Why do you say that they're not feasible?
It's the temperamental nature of them. We're always going to have that air of, well, we need something to back them up when they don't work. And I agree with that contention, and that's why I think it's not a feasible means of replacing fossil fuels. And I think where my stance has fallen now is that I think we need to be using the fossil fuels that we have access to and the electrification methods that have been taken on over in Asia to create a much more sustainable nuclear energy production. I think we had the conversation about, was it SMEs a while back? I remember the conversation about having small nuclear power generators in local neighbourhoods and whether we would want them there or not. And I was always saying yes. Like, I don't understand why we wouldn't want them there.
Well, I agree with you, but the description of them is not quite right, though, because, I mean, I don't know how big you think a small nuclear energy...
Oh, it's not small by any means.
No, they're the size of a football pitch, aren't they?
Well, I live around 3 football pitches, so I'm not unfamiliar with them. But it's the fact that we need to be moving to net zero. That's not a question. It's just a statement. And I don't think I'm seeing a lot of people discuss the geographical advantages of other countries compared to the UK and why nuclear power needs to be a much larger conversation that people seem to just be fear-mongering in and talking down on, and they use solar and wind energy to talk it down. Renewable energies are necessary, and I think electrification, I agree with Tony Blair on, is required. I just don't think we need to be sucking the earth dry of all of the fossil fuels for the sake of the fact that we aren't electrified enough.
OK, David, thank you very much. Gary says, here in France, to charge my electric car at a charging station would be 26 cents per kilowatt hour. In the UK, it would be 62p, at least double. And this is Gary living in France. I think that's actually more like 85p at certainly motorway service stations. Let's take another couple of texts before we go to a final call. This is from David. I know Tom Burke. His whole distinguished career has been spent studying and understanding energy policy. I'll take his advice any time over Tony Blair's. I thought you'd say over mine, and you'd probably be right on both counts. Thank you very much, David. Let's go to Grace in Ealing. Hello, Grace.
Hi. I'm just flabbergasted by the lack of concern for the impacts of climate change. It's really, really frustrating here having the intense heat that we're having, but it's so much worse for people in some other parts of our world who are facing increased risks of natural disasters, who are losing their already limited harvests, who are at increased risk from mosquito-borne diseases. I think we need to take climate change really, really seriously and not just be dilly-dallying about net zero, given how much it will cost ultimately to our country and to others, which have less wealth than ours does, to deal with the effects of climate change.
But don't you think over the past couple of decades, successive governments have actually done more than most other governments to decarbonise?
Yeah, and that's a great thing, although I think that some of our emissions are kind of offshored because we're having items manufactured for us elsewhere in the world and there's a carbon footprint on those. But just that other countries aren't working as quickly as we are doesn't mean that we shouldn't press on. The impact is really serious. I had someone from Generation Z talk to me earlier about how they're concerned about what the situation will be in a couple of decades' time. And we talk all the time about people not having kids. Part of the reason some young people are not having kids is that they're really scared about the future. And like I say, there are people already really suffering in less wealthy parts of our world right now. One of the things that Tony Blair did write in this paper was that he didn't agree with our government having cut international aid. And I concur on that because it can make so much impact, pound for pound, for people whose problems are far more severe than ours are. But he's kind of contradicting himself in that he thinks that we shouldn't be worrying about climate change as much as the government
He didn't say that.
Well, that's kind of the impression that he gives by saying that he doesn't think we should be pushing ahead with net zero.
Well, again, I think you've totally misunderstood or misinterpreted what he said. What he said was that Ed Miliband is pursuing these net zero policies to the exclusion of everything else. And does he really think that Xi Jinping in China is sitting there wondering what Ed Miliband is doing? Because we produce less than 1% of emissions in the world economy. If what you want to happen is to happen, then it's quite clear that other countries who produce most of the emissions, and we're talking about sort of 5 or 6 very big countries here, if they actually got with the agenda, then everyone would be very happy. So it's maybe Ed Miliband should be spending his time trying to persuade them.
Well, if he could persuade them, then that would be great. But I think, again, like I said, some of our emissions are probably offshored to China, so we should probably think about that. But I think, unfortunately, if we slow down on moving towards net zero, then it will encourage other countries not to move
Grace,
towards
we have to leave it there because I have to announce some very important breaking news. Chris, one of my producers, is an avid Crystal Palace fan. He's actually in Leipzig tonight. He will be going absolutely mental because Crystal Palace have now won the European Conference League. I know what that feeling is like because West Ham won it 3 years ago, and I shall live off that for the rest of my days. So congratulations to all the Palace fans. You are European champions. Now it just means that if Arsenal beat PSG on Saturday, it means that England will have won all 3 club competitions. If we weren't running out of time, we'd now be playing Jerusalem, wouldn't we, Tom? But unfortunately, we have run out of time. Thank you for all of your calls and messages this evening. I'll be back tomorrow from 7. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's James Max. But right now, Ben Kent.
Iain, thank you very much indeed. Didn't announce it when Barnet won the league last year, did he? Not a word. Thank you, Iain. Hello there, and a very, very good evening indeed to you tonight.
I feel really anxious that we are continuing to slide towards relegation, as I say in the essay, relegation from the Premier League of Nations.
Tony Blair pops up today with a mammoth essay explaining just what he thinks our current government is getting so wrong. And he doesn't pull his punches. It's fair to say it hasn't gone down well, this sort of diatribe about the state of Britain right now, with this generation of Labour politicians, with both Wes Streeting and Andy Burnham, suggesting Blair just doesn't understand the reality of people's lives today. So what do you think? Is Blair somebody we should be paying any attention to, or is he an out-of-touch yesterday's man who should pipe down?
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.